The Dave Hooker Show, represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorneys. Play to win, banksjones.com.
The Dave Hooker Show. A presentation of Off the Hook Sports. Objective insight, expertise, top guests. Available on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the Off the Hook Sports app. Download now for free. Also available on offthehooksports.com.
I compute and obey.
Now to Dave Hooker.
Ready.
Do you remember it wasn't that long ago where we'd be talking about right now, is Tennessee going to end up in, I don't know, that Independence Bowl? Is Tennessee going to be in the Music City Bowl? Well, things are a lot different now, kids, and we're glad to tell you that. As you know, Tennessee primed in the college football playoff, so we'll talk a little bit of that. And I love what Danny White said about potentially going to a BCS formula. Raise your hand if you've said that for, I don't know, about 3 years. That's me if you're on our video platform. If not, I just rose my hand. So there we are. Raise my hand. Is it rose my hand or raise my hand? Caleb, good morning.
It's raised. It's raised.
Yes,
you said Rose because your mind was on the Rose Bowl. So, you know.
That's it's exactly right. So we'll get to David Sanders here in just a second with Will West of the Sports Animal in Knoxville. Tennessee's basketball team is going to be the number one team in the nation. Mark it down. You heard it here first. This day in Tennessee sports history, we love Oli Lane joining us, so he will do so in the second hour. Also, Tennessee with another transfer. It's not a big loss. We'll discuss. Sorry, this ship is moving, and if you're not on it, you're going to get left at the dock. We've seen two already get left at the dock, and Bison Lang and Khalifa Keith. And now there is another stat of the day as well. And Caleb's going to keep on going. That teams should try to lose the conference championship games. And Bill Belichick may be coming back to football, but it would be college football. That is bizarre. All right, let's go ahead and bring in our. Did I ask you how you're doing this morning, Caleb?
You didn't ask me how I was doing, but you did let me speak, so I could have said beforehand that I'm doing okay. So I'm not going to hold it against you this time.
Okay, well, let me just ask you, because I know you get very sensitive about this. How are you doing?
I am good. I'm amazing, Dave.
Okay, that's great. Will, let's bring Will West of the Sports Animal in here. Did you know that Caleb gets very sensitive about not asking him how he's doing every morning?
No, I did not. But you know what, Caleb? I appreciate that you can express yourself that way and let Dave know when there's a problem, as opposed to letting something be underlining. That's called a locker room guy.
You don't let it simmer. You don't let it simmer. It's a little effeminate, but you don't let it simmer. All right, Will, let me ask you, how are you doing this morning?
Yeah, we're fine. It's good. We got a workout in. Woke up at 7 o'clock, got our workout in, ate some eggs. Now we're good to go, man.
True story. I drove halfway there and turned around. I'm usually pre-medicated. It's a true story. I was like, man, a cup of coffee sounds good. All right, go ahead and click the like and subscribe button. We greatly appreciate that. We appreciate Will being a part of the program, and we're going to go ahead and get to today's tough question. It's how we lead off every program. Today's tough question brought to you by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com.
Today's tough question. Take a side. Take a stand. The Dave Hooker Show, a presentation of offthehooksports.com.
All right, Will, you were actually on the air when this happened. I was listening to your show as I was running errands. But Tennessee does indeed sign David Sanders, the four-star, offensive tackle out of Charlotte. So your thoughts on what David Sanders does to this class?
I think I got to be honest with you. I have never been a recruiting guy. Part of it was watching you and Josh Ward cover recruiting in the day. That looks like the worst job that you could ever have. Like, I would rather shovel out septic tanks than have to cover recruiting. It looks horrible. But
it actually is going to be on dirty jobs.
But so if he's good enough that everybody wanted him and Ohio State made a late run to kind of create a negotiation, to me, it's as much about the optics of not losing that guy to Ohio State as anything else. Now, you need a 5-star tackle. You need a guy that Tennessee has been deficient at tackle the last few years. They have. And if there's one weakness, I think I would say under Josh Heupel's time, Darnell Wright got really a lot better his senior year, but Tennessee's been deficient in tackle for a while. So to add the best tackle in the class, I think is massive. To beat out Ohio State in a negotiation from an NIL standpoint, when the last few years it's been Ohio State or Texas that kind of just they can pay more for literally everybody. I think that speaks volumes, and the optics of you landing him instead of Ohio State, I think, is massive. And look, Tennessee, it's 2 years in a row that you're in the blue chip ratio, right? And so you were in the blue chip ratio with or without him, and then you kind of just dropped the cherry on this bad boy by putting the top offensive tackle in the class versus instead of going to Ohio State, he's coming to you. I think it's massive. Now, do I know if he's any good? I have no idea whatsoever, and not a single one of us do. This is why I hate recruiting.
Right. Let me. What do you mean by the blue chip ratio? Because I heard you use that on your show. What exactly do you mean by that?
Yeah, Bud Elliott did this with 247 Sports years ago, and I think it started when he was at SB Nation. And so, if you go through the history of the national championship since we have had recruiting rankings, the blue chip ratio is you have more 4 and 5 stars on your roster than 3 stars. One team ever has won a national title while not being in the blue chip ratio, and that team was the Cam Newton Auburn team. The team they played was Oregon, one of 2 other teams that ever played for the national title who weren't in the blue chip ratio. Tennessee didn't have a class in the blue chip ratio where it was more 4 and 5 than 3 or below since 2019 until last year. And now you're 2 years in a row that you've assigned in the blue chip ratio. And again, unless you're going to get Cam Newton from junior college, if you want to win a national title, you have to be in the blue chip ratio. Tennessee hasn't been. Other schools that played for the title, I think that Washington team was just below, TCU, and then Oregon and Auburn. Literally, that's it in the history of college football to even play for a national championship. So for Tennessee, like I know you're ranked 10th, and it kind of might feel very Butch Jones-esque to be ranked 10th and 7th in the SEC. But if you look at that little number beside that of like the difference between the 5th ranked team Ohio State and the 10th ranked team Tennessee is like 1 point out of 100. Yeah, so it's 1%. So their class is 1% better from the points ranking when you add everything up. I just think this class is great for Tennessee, and then you add David Sanders kind of on top, and you're able to keep him from going to Ohio State. Tennessee is going to be really close to the blue chip ratio this year, maybe in the blue chip ratio. We saw it this year, right? Tennessee's roster looked different against Georgia and Alabama than it has in the past. It wasn't the system got them, or Hendon Hooker came out of nowhere, or Jalen Hyatt just played out of his mind. It wasn't anything like that. The Tennessee roster's good. Is it elite yet? No, but it's good, finally. So now you add another class of 4 and 5 star guys, plus the top tackle in the land to what you've already had. There's going to be a rebuilding process because you're rebuilding on the offensive line and defensive line next year. But you got to feel really good about where Tennessee is from a roster standpoint these days.
Yeah, and I'm gonna play off what you said a little bit. The optics would have been bad, and I'll offer this up too from my many years of recruiting. There are certain guys that if you get, you really can't miss on. Like if you go after some Bison Langs that you think could grow into a player but may not, and he recently transferred out of the program, then you're going to hit or miss on those guys. But when you get the upper tier guys, and I consider Sanders and his rating an upper tier guy, at worst, he's going to be, you would think, a 2-year starter that's good. At best, he's an all-SEC top player. In other words, he's one of those guys that the chances of missing on are about 1 in 10.
Yeah, he's at least going to be a dude, right? Like, so that's you know what I mean? Like, there have been Wanya Morris as a guy that I would point to. He was at least a dude. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know that he was ever elite, but he was a dude. So, and with Sanders, I do think also recruiting services have gotten better at identifying and kind of reading offensive line talent. They're a little bit better at that now than they were probably back then. But you're right. The worst case scenario, as long as this guy's healthy and doesn't have some type of off the field issue, is that he's a starter in the SEC, and you're hoping that you can develop him into becoming an all SEC player and a first round pick.
Well, I do cover recruiting. I share your sentiment of it. I am traumatized. Part of it is, funny enough, recruiting to me is.
I got a twitch actually.
Well, recruiting to me, I just want to point this out. It's very similar to free agency in the NFL. Well, I don't know if you know, I live in the DC area, and I lived through there during the Dan Snyder years. And Washington felt they won the Super Bowl every year because of their free agent success, and they never won a Super Bowl. It came close, but how much pressure is on Josh Heupel with a guy like David Sanders for this reason? I don't think it's any secret that Tennessee has failed miserably in terms of signing high school offensive linemen under Josh Heupel to this point. If David Sanders doesn't work out, I mean, does that mean it's time to cut bait with Glenn Ellerbe?
Well, I don't know that it's time to cut bait with Glenn Ellerbe. Here's the concern, right? Anytime you run any kind of veer, you're not running a real NFL system, and so can you develop a guy for the National Football League? That's the concern that I would have. And I don't know that Glenn Ellerbe is making or breaking that necessarily. So I don't know how much of that's on Glenn Ellerbe versus that's on the system, right? So, like, I mean, look at the high school teams that have run beer over the years. Gibbs, when they ran beer, right, when Oli Lane was there. So it's you're just kind of getting in the way of a guy. You're not actually pushing him off the block or taking that step play side and hitting the guy that's in front of you. I guess it's not as much of that. Or there's a little bit more variation this year to what they do. I would start. To me, the question that I would ask is Glenn Ellerbe good enough at developing them? I would ask the question, can this system develop offensive linemen, period, or do you just need to recruit to this system? And that means you're never going to have an elite offensive line because you're always recruiting to the system. But I think the rest of that, a lot of it comes down to strength and conditioning coach is going to play a large part in that. I think one of the reasons Tennessee struggled, especially under Derek Dooley on the offensive line once Sam Pittman left, I remember having one player showed up in the studio one day, and he's talking to me and Jimmy Hyams in the sports office, and he was talking about at that time. I'll just say it. I think it was a former player who is now currently a sports radio host, and not this city, but in this state, if you know what I'm talking about. And he said Marcus Jackson, a freshman, was the strongest guy on the team, benching 415. At the time, I was benching 315 as a 35-year-old man. You know what I mean? Like that's not okay. You know what I mean? That your strongest guy is doing 415. So I think that I would look at the strength and conditioning if it's not Glenn Ellerbe, because I think Glenn Ellerbe's coaching to the system very well, but it's a weird system, and I don't know that this system is going to work for everybody. And I don't know that this system necessarily develops players for the National Football League. And if that ever becomes a problem, that would be the bigger question that I have is, does Josh Heupel have to adjust what he does up front?
Dave, before you jump in, I just have to point out, it's also true that Derek Dooley didn't win a whole class without signing an offensive line, which is still the most unheard of thing ever done in the history of college football recruiting.
Okay, dead serious, right? That's happening on that signing day. Josh Ward is on the air with me going off about, oh, this is bad. This is really bad. He didn't sign a single lineman. The level of cursing that Josh received in DMs and on social media for pointing that out, the things that people said to him were incredible. I also think so. Dooley also brought in this random strength and conditioning guy that we're going to do like an MMA focus. And so they took out a lot of the heavy weights and put in TRX bands in a UFC cage. So it's like, what are you so you're doing push-ups? That's what you're going to do to get your linemen strong. Come on. And Bama. And then so you would see it, right? Like we get to media days, Bama would have a 290-pound defensive end, a guy about Tyree West size as their defensive end. Tennessee would roll some 250-pound guy up there. And I'm like, it's probably not going to go well this year, boys.
Yep. We're going to talk about another transfer that is leaving Tennessee's football program, and he happens to play wide receiver. But we were talking to Jimmy Hyams about this yesterday, strictly in terms of high school talent, whether it's evaluating or developing or probably a little bit of both. Are you more concerned about the offensive line or the receivers? Not to say they can't be supplemented with NIL and not to lose the forest from the trees because they are playing for a national championship. But what are you more concerned about as we look at the way this roster is developed? Offensive line or wide receiver?
I would wide receiver, and I don't think it's the players. Like I've watched Chris Brazzell be good, right? So if Chris Brazzell is good at Tulane and he's not good at Tennessee, that's not a Chris Brazzell problem to me.
Well, I think I'm talking about just high school recruits.
The high school recruits, I think you're getting good enough talent. I think they're poorly coached right now. I think so. A lot of what they're trying to do on the wide receiver court doesn't make a lot of sense to me. You're running guys into space and that are into defenders instead of trying to Where's the open space? Attack the open space with your wide receivers. Brew McCoy was amazing, right? So and you're right. They haven't brought in I guess they have with Matthews, but they haven't used him a ton. But if you're not using Brew McCoy, who I watched be amazing in the Pac-12 championship game against Oregon, if you're not using Chris Brazzell, who I watched be fantastic at Tulane, some of that's on Nico this year because Nico, those are guys that if they're in single coverage, you throw a ball up and let them make a play, and Nico didn't get comfortable with that until the Vandy game, it seemed like. But I think Tennessee's wide receivers have been pretty poorly coached so far, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to me why they're doing the things that they're doing. And also, maybe part of that is I'm a Giants fan, and I see Jalen Hyatt flat can't play football. Cannot. You know what I mean? Is not capable of playing at an NFL level. He's not good enough. And so I think they need to get back to running to grass like Bryles did. And instead, it seems like they have certain routes that they have to do. They're all super long developing. And I don't know that it's necessarily the individual position coaching that's bad, but the way the wide receivers are being used is not good enough, and they've got to get better with it during this offseason. Part of that might be Joey Halsley's new. Part of, you know what I mean? Like, he's even talked about the growing pains he's dealt with stepping into that position for Alex Golish. Part of that might be Heupel trying to make sure his wide receivers run the full route tree and all of that stuff. But I don't think it's the players, right? Again, because are most of those guys elite from high school? No, but I think they're good enough. And you see the open spaces on the field you could attack with your wide receivers, and Tennessee doesn't do it. And that's why everybody did the same thing for Tennessee outside of a couple of teams that just always run the exact same sits. Like Clark Lee runs what Clark Lee runs. He ain't changing for nobody. But doing that umbrella with 4 players over the top, 10, 12 yards off the ball, you beat them to death with tunnel screens and little smoke routes and things like that until they get out of it, and then you can beat them deep. Tennessee didn't. They just kept trying to beat everybody deep, and it didn't make any sense to me whatsoever. It's like a basketball team that wants to shoot threes, so the opponent tries to pressure the perimeter. You know what you do? You dribble past them and hit a bunch of layups, and then they're going to back off and leave you open for your threes. So I think it's a way that the receivers are used more than the players themselves. I don't know that the high school talent has been elite that they brought in, but I think they're good enough. But if the guys who from the transfer portal are elite don't get used well, why would I expect the high school guys to get used well?
David Sanders said that Josh Heupel told him that he was the leader of this class. Was that just coach speak? Also, our poll question that is up now is getting David Sanders was a must or gravy. We'll ask Will both of those questions. 30 seconds from Banks and Jones. Why Banks and Jones? Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks and Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks and Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks and Jones. T. Scott Jones. Banks and All right, so our poll question is this. David Sanders was a must or gravy? A must 70%, gravy 30%. I'm still thinking on that one. I don't have my answer, so I'm going to throw it to you first, Will.
Gravy. I think you didn't have to have him. I mean, it's fantastic. You definitely want him if you can have him. It's a different day and age, right? Like it's back in the day. If your kid didn't get enough nutrients from school lunch, you were in trouble. And then we got Flintstone vitamins, and you can supplement. So it's you have the transfer portal that's there, and Tennessee has missed in the transfer portal, but Tennessee's hit at a pretty darn high clip compared to the rest of the teams in college football and in the SEC. You can go get another tackle. You don't want to though, because how you build championship teams is by recruiting in high school and developing those players. Otherwise, Lane Kiffin would be winning championships right now, right? But you don't have to have literally anybody in football anymore from a recruiting standpoint, because you can go find another guy who can be good at that position through the transfer portal.
Well, wait, to play devil's advocate, you wouldn't have called Nico gravy.
I think you needed a quarterback. It didn't have to be Nico. I mean, if it ended up being Jackson Arnold or somebody like that, I think it would have been, you'd have been okay. You needed a quarterback. But if you didn't have a quarterback, you needed to go to the transfer portal and go get a quarterback. Nico, it has not gone as well as I thought it was going to for Nico this year. Like, I understand why when I was thinking, when I was hearing that, hey, maybe Joe Milton doesn't want to play football right now. And I was like, well, why don't you just play Nico? He's looked like, just throw him out there and figure out what you can figure out. And I kept hearing he's not ready. Now I see it, right? Like there's still some things that he's developing, and this is kind of what you get from most pro-style passers. If you look at Matt Ryan, Andrew Luck, if you look at Josh Allen, if you look pretty much anybody in the NFL not named Peyton Manning or Tua, their second year they weren't that great as a pocket passer. But you could have gotten someone else besides Nico. It's just the hype, the lore of Nico is kind of awesome, but it's not like that's translated to the field particularly well. Was he a top 7 quarterback in the SEC this year? Because I would say probably not. I have high expectations for him. I see the talent. But you could have had somebody else in that position, even though you want to have Nico.
Yeah, I remember I was the guy, and I'm sorry, I'll turn it to you, Caleb, but I was the guy who said, play him last year. And then somebody finally reached out to me and said, this is what he sounds like when he calls plays. This was after, but this was during September. They said he'd come to the play. And he just was uncertain about calling a lot of things. So in retrospect, I think I was wrong. I don't think he was ready to play until maybe late in the year. Caleb?
To y'all's point, though, you mentioned him. Jackson Arnold just hit the transfer portal, as did Connor Wegman, standing out because Connor Wegman said he wants to go play for a college football playoff contender, which is a giant middle finger to Texas A&M, saying that he doesn't think they'll be there next year. I kind of see, I don't know how you guys see it, but I get your point, Will, but I do somewhat see David Sanders as a must. Only because Tennessee's failed so miserably with the offensive linemen they've been scouting so far to this point. So they needed a guy that's a surefire hit, which I think Sanders is.
How much did they miss on ability, or did they miss on the type of dude they brought in?
And on offensive line?
Offensive tackle specifically.
I think they have missed because you had Georgia and Alabama getting the pick of the litter. And then you have to compete with everybody else, and then you've got a hard sell. I think Tennessee has, as this is just my thought and want more your thoughts than mine, but I think they've kind of topped the hill, so to speak, of you can walk into any living room and have a pretty good shot nowadays. Now, I don't think that was the case, which is why I just throw Bison Lang under the bus again, which is why they had to settle for Bison Lang. I saw that kid. I saw the tape of him, and I was like, yeah, I remember when it happened. I was like, we can talk about it on the show, but that kid's not going to be a high-level player. At best, he's going to play his senior year, and that's it.
Yeah. Caleb, what do you think? Do you think, because I look at John Campbell, I think there's a reason other teams wanted John Campbell. He went to Miami. I think John Campbell's maybe just a little casual of a dude. You know what I mean? I think Lance Hurd is looking at himself not as a businessman, but as a businessman, if we can paraphrase Jay-Z. So he dealt with injury in fall camp, and I'm not playing if I got any level. Just he's not going to play if he deals with injury, and then he ends up out of shape, and it takes him a while to get back into shape. So I think those guys are good enough athletes. I question, like, again, there's a reason all those defensive players left because of what Tennessee paid John Campbell, right? They were like, I'm a lot better than this guy, and you're paying him, and I'm all in, and he's not, and you're paying him. A lot of people were upset with that. Lance Hurd hasn't panned out like you'd hope that he would, but I think those guys are good enough athletically to be what you need them to be, and they did get better down the stretch, I would say.
All right, I got to change gears. Let's get to What the H, and it's brought to you by Double D Piping.
What the? What was he thinking?
Release the hounds.
The Dave Hooker Show.
Keep cool.
A presentation of OffTheHookSports.com.
Danny White says that the selection process for the college football playoff should be more selective, i.e. a BCS type of formula. What are your thoughts on that?
Dave, you were on our program Wednesday with us, and we went through the BCS rankings, and Tennessee would be ranked one spot lower than they are right now in the BCS. So,
Exactly.
Look, to me, it's going to be flawed. I would say there's two big things that I have a problem with the college football playoffs, the current scenario. Number one, you're saying the best teams, not the most deserving teams. No one knows who the best teams are. 2 years ago when Kirk Herbstreit's on Get Up and First Take and all those shows saying Alabama should be ahead of Tennessee, yes, they have the same record, and then Tennessee beat them head-to-head, but Alabama's better now because they're just better. That's what the eyeball test tells you. I would also say look around the world of sports. How often is the eyeball test right? Very rarely. So why are we using that as the number one thing that we rank these teams for the college football playoff? I would say, number one, change the verbiage to the most deserving teams, not the best teams, because then you get into subjective. You also get into subjective things when I look at who's on that committee, and you have sitting athletics directors. So I watch 10 college football games a week, right? Like every week during the college football season, I watch 10 games so that I make sure I know what I'm talking about when I talk about these other teams. It takes about 40 hours a week to do that before I do my other job. And so I'm easy 80 hours a week in during football season. If Ward Manuel's spending 40 hours a week watching, and I would say this, if to really know about the top 15 teams that you're choosing from for the top 12, you have to watch probably more than 10 games per week. If Ward Manuel, the Michigan's athletics director, who's the chair right now of the playoff committee, is watching even 10 games a week, he's taking 40 hours a week all football season long to not be Michigan's athletics director. Do you think that's happening, or do you think Ward Manuel's not watching these dang games?
I don't think he's watching the games.
That's what I'm saying. These guys clearly aren't watching the games. They clearly have. And it's also something you said a few weeks ago on our show that about people you knew with AP votes. I said, how much should they change as they go along? You're like, I don't know. Most people just try to make sure that they create a ranking that would justify their preseason ranking as much as possible. I think they created a ranking, and since then, they're trying to justify that original ranking. They would rather be right than correct. So Georgia loses, they drop 9 spaces because they didn't think a lot of Georgia. Ohio State loses to a worse team, they drop 4 spaces, right? So, and one's at home and the other one's on the road. To me, clearly they have their darlings, right? They think really highly of Boise because of that Oregon win. But if you watch Oregon football, Idaho was a 10-point game. They barely beat Boise on a walk-off. They were only up a touchdown to Oregon State. It was 22-14 at the half. And something happened at the half that made some adjustments, and they've been a different team ever since the second half of that third game of the season. That wasn't the same Oregon team that we saw before that. Boise got the team that Idaho lost to by 10 points. So it's if you're watching these games, it doesn't make any sense. Alabama, they think Alabama's really, really good. So Alabama's getting the benefit of the doubt despite getting absolutely boat raced by an Oklahoma team everybody else was able to block, and Alabama couldn't block them. So I just think they seem to have their darlings trying to justify what they thought at the beginning of the rankings as opposed to ranking them as they think they're the best. And I think it comes down to those two things. You cannot be a sitting athletics director or really a person with a full-time job and be on that committee. And you cannot and you shouldn't. I don't think we should say the best teams. I think we should say the most deserving teams. Because, again, I watch 10 football games a week, and I know my eyeball test isn't going to be 100% accurate. So why are we using that?
It's pretty good. I'll give you that, though. I'll listen to you a lot. Go ahead, Caleb.
I appreciate it.
Well, I want to know your thoughts on this. Well, this is my hot take. If I were on the committee, I wouldn't watch the games. I would look at their record, their strength of schedule, their head-to-head, and their quality wins and their quality losses. And that's it. That's as far as I would go. And I think that's kind of what they're doing. And am I wrong for not having a problem with that, even though they're lying when they say that's not what they're doing?
Well, I don't think they're even doing that, though, or SMU would have been ranked more highly than they are, right? Because SMU's one loss was to BYU they made a quarterback change, and SMU got a lot better.
Yeah, but their SOS rank is still, I think, in the 70s.
Yeah, and I would say that I would like to know what they're using from a strength of schedule because they're not giving us the formula for their strength of schedule rankings as well. Like there was one when I looked at Notre Dame's schedule, and I remember it, and I remember one of the strength of schedule ratings had, I think it was ESPN's, had Notre Dame with like 4 spaces behind Tennessee's strength of schedule. And I'm looking at the group of 5 teams they're playing. I'm like, well, then whoever made the strength of schedule doesn't know what the hell they're talking about, right? So why would I listen to their strength of schedule? It's because I think that can become subjective as well. So I would say if we had a legitimate strength of schedule, I wouldn't have that big of a problem with it. But you also said you would do the thing the committee has not talked about doing, or it's not what Bill Hancock told us at Media Days. You would consider their losses. Remember, the committee told us they were going to go with their strength of wins, not strength of schedule, not losses. And that was like, so you can win, have 3, you could have 2 top 10 wins like Ohio State does, and then a loss to Michigan doesn't hurt you. You can have Alabama's schedule where you have 3 ranked team wins. You have 2 losses to 500 teams. So, and they would not be 500 had they not beaten you. So you're at least considering the losses as well, Caleb, which I think gives you a better metric with that. I think that what you're saying comes completely down to how accurate the strength of schedule is. And I don't know that and we don't know what the committee's using from a strength of schedule standpoint.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I like the idea of a formula to take to take subjectivity out of it, this idea to stop these conspiracies. I'm not so sure there are conspiracies behind the committee, although there is an inconsistency. I'm for Alabama being in. I don't mind Ohio State being ahead of Tennessee. I do have a problem with Notre Dame being ahead of Georgia. I'm like, if you're going to take schedule strength into account at all, there's no way you could have Notre Dame ahead of Georgia.
Yeah.
But I will say that I do think the human element can help, because don't you think there were sometimes just things that you just bait? My example, I always go back to 2000, Miami, Florida State. Florida State got in because of strength of schedule, but Miami beat Florida State and they both had one loss. Isn't that where the human element's needed to say, okay, obviously Miami's the better team?
Well, I mean, head-to-head should be the tiebreaker that ends all tiebreakers. I don't need Kirk Herbstreit politicking on the ESPN telling me about the eyeball test, right? Like if someone, you know how I know they're better? They beat them. That's how I know they're better. So I don't need to have another discussion beyond that. And so I do think, like, to your point, the human element can be there, I think, to me, to make decisions on tiebreakers. Like one thing the committee's doing right now, and I'm going to talk a little bit out of both sides of my mouth, they're clearly punishing Miami for those 3 games the ACC officials gave them. They're not treating Miami like a 10-2 football team right now, because the Virginia Tech, they're not. The Virginia Tech game, very questionable. The Cal game, abject crap. They should have lost the Cal game. The officials just stole that game from Cal, point blank, not having the targeting call there. And then the next week against Louisville, or it was 2 weeks later against Louisville, I think Cam Ward's hand was going forward. I don't know that his arm was going forward, though. And so how do you have indisputable evidence to overturn the call if none of us can tell if his arm was going forward? So at least 2 of those 3 games they probably should have lost. And the committee is treating Miami as if they're a 9-3 team, not a 10-2 team. I don't have a problem with that, because otherwise you might see other conferences put the fix in with the replay officials to make sure, or look at it. I don't think the game's like fixed. I think, do we really want to stop our conference's top national title contender because of a call that might have gone the other way? We're going to err on the side of that. But they did it 3 times for Miami. So to me, that's where I agree with you, Caleb. The human element, there needs to be some level of a human element in there. What I don't want is the eyeball test, the beauty pageant, because I know for a fact the people that are on that committee aren't watching football games, and I don't know how many of them know enough about football to be the ones that make that decision, especially if they're not watching the football games, if it's going to be the eyeball test. If you did what Caleb did and they just said wins, losses, big wins, big losses, I kind of don't have a problem with that at the end of the day. And then we'll use head-to-head and some other things as tiebreakers as we go along. I don't think I would have as big of a problem with that. The Ward Manual said 2 weeks ago, why is this team ranked over this team? Reese asked him, because we think they're better. So you're using the eyeball test, and you have people not watching the games use the eyeball test, which is, to me, really problematic, right?
Okay, I'm going to tell you why they're not going to go to a formula. 30 seconds from Double D Piping.
Double D Piping provides full-service fire protection on any scale. From residential homes to government facilities, we can assist any customer through design, fabrication, installation, inspection, and demonstration of fire suppression systems. With 30 years of service across 5 states and a full staff with over 40 years experience, our quality can't be beaten. Don't get caught watching what you could have prevented. Call Double D Piping, the absolute best.
So when it comes to media in general, Will's one of the smartest guys I know, and I've talked to him about ratings, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you why they're not going to have a BCS type of formula. Because they got a show every Tuesday night, and they sell a bleep ton of advertising for it. So I don't think that ever goes away.
I think that what Sankey and Petiti are trying to do right now, according to both CBS and Yahoo, they kind of both have the same story this morning. I think well, here's what will happen. They'll do a BCS and then have a committee. And I don't think I have that big of a problem with it. Again, if they did what Caleb said he would do, I would have zero problem with them doing this whatsoever, and then have a committee that answers for it, and you use the human element as your tiebreakers. Why not do this kind of like the NCAA tournament, where you have a net ranking, you have a quad 1, a quad 2, a quad 3, quad 4, where you rank all the teams that you have the BCS that does that, and then you have the teams that rank them. I would also say you should just rank the top 25 teams, and then you take who's there. They've tried to get cute. When they put Boise at 12 to begin this, so that whoever was going to be ranked 12th doesn't feel like they got jobbed by the group of 5 team that was in. They kind of painted themselves into a corner, and I know it's year 1. So that's part of it. But you're right. Look, at the end of the day, Tuesday night, ESPN literally owns this thing. ESPN literally owns the SEC. ESPN's going to make sure that there's some level of human element in television show about this. But let's be very honest. One of the things that we've missed in college football, and a little bit of this is on ESPN, and I'm not a 4-letter network hater. Man, we love the professional wrestling aspect of college football, right? We don't want it to get too corporate, do we?
That's the tradition of it.
Yeah.
If you go back over years, it's always arguing about should it be Alabama or Nebraska? Should it be blah, 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 and split national championships and Georgia Tech and all that in Colorado. I mean, that has always been at the core of college football, and I don't think they ever want that to go away.
Well, I think I will say, because SEC Media Days, you know, it was. They using Caleb, you've probably been there. You know, it was. It used to be that. It used to be a train wreck. It was a carnival. It was a traveling professional wrestling show in Hoover, Alabama, with fans everywhere and people throwing things at Clay Travis when he comes down the escalator, and just it was crazy, right? It was just nuts. And Auburn fans showing up at 4 a.m. local time and dressed in Ohio State gear to troll the Alabama for losing to Ohio State the year before. Like, it was just insane what it used to be. And then ESPN made it corporate. They made it polished. And now it sucks. Like, I'm just going to be honest. I'm probably never going back. You know what I mean? Like, it's just not good. So you don't want to take that away completely from college football. So to me, there has to be a balance of, let's have a little bit of a train wreck, and let's also have a way for this to be played out so the best team gets to win, instead of it just being, you know, the BCS, and then we play the two teams, or the bowl systems lay it all out there so everybody can line their pockets and get free cruises and golf trips from different conferences and bowl committees.
Hot take. I like the Bulls. I like the two national title. I've made that case for a while, Will, and what I've argued is I've made the case that you're sacrificing what's great about the 3 months of the regular season for 3 weeks in December. And people bring up how exciting March Madness is. Yeah, and no one cares about the college basketball regular season. You watch Duke and UNC play, I go to sleep because I don't care, because I know they're both going to the NCAA tournament. That's what they've turned college football into.
But I would argue, and I made the argument to Bill Hancock about this years ago, right? It, like when we went to the 14 playoff, more games mattered. We went to the 12-team playoff, now more games matter in the regular season. Whereas
I want but 1 versus 2 doesn't matter. That's my problem.
Yeah, that may make sense. But when I'm watching, like, that Ohio State Michigan game mattered, even though Michigan was 6-6, and in years past it probably wouldn't have mattered, right? Like the Alabama Oklahoma game mattered. The Miami Syracuse game, I'm watching on the edge of my seat. I would not have cared about Miami Syracuse if we still had the old bowl system or the BCS or anything like that. So there have been more games. Now, part of it is this. I'm watching 10 games every week anyway, and if those games don't matter towards the national championship, that would suck. So so some of this is for, like, me and gamblers, because we're the only ones watching this much football. It's made so many more games matter throughout the regular season, but college football is tribal, and there are a lot of people that are going to watch their game and maybe one or two others, and probably not even all of one or two others, and that's it. And I do wonder if it takes away some of the luster from those types of fans.
Will, have a blessed day, sir. I hope I didn't keep you too long. I certainly appreciate it when you have me on, and I love your insight, as always. I'm not only a friend, but a fan as well.
Dave, likewise, man. Dave, Caleb, thank you. Fantastic job, guys.
Thanks, sir. I appreciate it. Will West right there, the sports animal. Yeah, they want that television show. Sorry. I mean, what do you think? I have no way of even guessing what that show's worth that they sell.
Dave, I'm not going to be surprised if they don't start the television show in September in a couple of years.
Oh, it's funny you say that. I was kind of sitting here thinking that I'm a little bit surprised they don't do a preseason show. Why not?
Yeah, you're right. Just go ahead and do the preseason show and just rank them throughout the year.
Here is the thought. Okay. First of all, I would change two things, and then we're going to move on, because Tennessee has had a player hit the transfer portal that actually was pretty close to playing last year. But I want to here's what I would do. If they ask me, I would have a BCS formula component, and that would be 50% of it. And then 50% would be this committee. Okay. However, their individual votes have to be public. Each week, I want to know who Randall McDaniel's voting for. I want to know who these guys are voting for, and I think that's fair.
No, I think that's fair. I mean, that kind of was the way the BCS worked, though. Remember, they took the AP poll into account back then.
Yeah, and then the AP thought, we shouldn't influence it, so they kind of
pulled out. Yep.
Yeah, and they shouldn't. Reporters shouldn't influence it. But you put together some sort of BCS formula. That's a portion of it, and then the committee's a portion of it. Is there another portion that needs to be divvied up, or that's pretty much where we are?
No, I'm fine with that. I would go computer. Here's what I would do. I would have computers do the rankings, and have a committee sit on the other side. And I would almost go all computers. But then I would say if the committee disagrees with something, they could change it, but they have to vote unanimously to change it.
Okay, I don't hate that. I think you're actually really onto something there. The Hemp House, the premier hemp dispensary online with a wide variety, great selection, and strict standards. Hemp House Chat with 2Ts.com. Hemp House Chat with 2Ts.com. Use the promo code HOOK for 10% off. That's HOOK for 10% off. Also, want to remind you while you're online shopping, you have got to check out Hound Dogs of Knoxville. Champions look good in orange. HDKnoxville.com. HDKnoxville.com. Let's get to this day in Tennessee sports history. Caleb, what do you got, sir?
On this day back in 1930, Tennessee closed out the regular season, beating Florida 13-6.
And what year was that again?
1930. They finished 9-1. Their only loss was to Alabama, which cost them the Southern Conference title.
Do you have the series in front of you by chance? I'm trying to think back as far as when they played and when they didn't, because that wasn't an annual series, right?
No, it wasn't an annual series till 1990. And Tennessee won the first 10 games in the series, funny enough. 1916, 1921, 28, 30, 32, 33, 40, 44, 52, 53. And then Florida finally got him in 54, 2 years after Nealon retired.
Okay, great stuff. Be sure and check out the Vol Report brought to you by City Heating and Air. City Heating and Air, 50 years in East Tennessee. Integrity matters. CityHeatandAir.com. With Caleb Calhoun, I'm Dave Hooker. The show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, BanksandJones.com.
I've been in business actually 19 years this year. I've been in the community since 1993. You're getting a lot of information. Unlike when you were working, they made the choice for you. Now you have to make the choice. Come to us and let us help you make it easy. Call Medicare Misty, MedicareMisty.com or 423-777-5577. Let us help them sleep at night.
And we call her Medicare Misty.
Now in its 45th year, the second and third generations continue Joe Neubert's commitment.
His vision of what this business needed to be, we still try to live up to that.
Joe Neubert Collision Center.
Why Banks & Jones? Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks & Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks & Jones. T. Scott Jones. BanksandJones.com. Dave Hooker here for Dynasty Pools and Spas, your home for the best spas and everything you need to jump right in. Relaxing, therapeutic, absolutely. But what sets Dynasty Pools and Spas apart from others is that you get everything with any spa purchase. You get the cover lift, the steps, delivery, and chemicals. When Dynasty Pools and Spas delivers your spa from their Athens location within 125 miles, you'll get your own personal hydrotherapy spa. Mention me, Dave Hooker, or Off the Hook Sports, and get $500 off your top quality new spa. Dynasty Pools and Spas, just off the Athens exit. Drop in and receive a free gift from Off the Hook Sports, Dynasty Pools and Spas. Mention Off the Hook Sports for a drop-in prize and that $500 discount, Dynasty Pools and Spas. To check out some of the Dynasty Spa models and to buy spa chemicals, go to dynastypoolsandspas.com. Dynasty Pools and Spas.
Represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorneys.
Excuse me, Your Honor.
Play to win, BanksJones.com.
Who's this guy?
Hello, wizard.
The Dave Hooker Show,
Who?
a presentation of Off the Hook Sports,
What?
YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the free Off the Hook Sports app. Back to Dave Hooker.
Welcome back to the program. Let's talk some Tennessee hoops. This is like the second day my voice is cracked. What happens if you go through a second puberty? What does that mean? Do I get really grumpy and stuff, Caleb?
I have no idea. Can you go through a second puberty? I want to hear about this.
Well, you can, but you got to be on gear. You know
I
what
don't
that
even know
means?
what that means.
You don't want to. Does anybody know
I'm
what?
a really good sheltered kid, guys.
Okay. Does anybody know what gear is? That is on our message board right now. If you know what gear is, go ahead and throw it out there.
Dave, did you know I never got drunk before I turned 18?
Actually, I didn't either.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I didn't. It was right at March. Barry Bonds did gear. Yes, Barry Bonds was on gear.
So roids. Okay.
It's just another word. It's a street term for steroids. So
Nothing wrong with steroids.
nothing wrong with some steroids.
Have you?
I did think at one point with baseball, since you're not physically hitting each other and you could kill each other, that just let them do whatever they want to. I mean, technically, if you get LASIK, like I got from Doctors Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn, isn't that performance enhancing?
Steroids, though, were I covered the whole. I didn't cover, but I was very, very heavily involved in following the Balco scandal, which is how steroids in baseball broke. And the problem is it causes long-term health damage to do it the way they were doing it. But to compete, you would have to do it that way, and it was going to be unfair if you were trying to make it in the big league. So I get it, but because I don't know if you know this, you know the story of why Barry Bonds took steroids in the first place, right?
Because he saw Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa getting more notoriety.
He and Ken Griffey Jr., Bonds and Griffey, after the summer that saved baseball in '98, were at a Christmas party together, and they were ranting because, let's be honest, all things being equal, Bonds and Griffey were way better than McGwire and Sosa, right? Like by far.
Yes,
as baseball
not
players.
close.
And they were ranting. They're like, these guys are cheating, and they're getting all the fame, and we're better than them. And Bonds was like, I'm going to start doing this hardcore. His exact quote was, I'm going to have to start doing this hardcore crap to keep up. And Griffey decided it's just not worth my long-term health, so he didn't do it.
Yes, Timothy, I'm going to get your super chat. I'm sorry, I'm still not used to reading those. By the way, all super chats go to young Quincy Calhoun's college fund, as we hope Caleb doesn't gamble that away, but you never know. But he's promised he wouldn't. So thank you for the substantial super chat. We do appreciate that, but all that does go to Caleb in all sincerity. So feel free to do that. Doesn't line my pockets. And but it will send Quincy to, I'm thinking Harvard. That's pretty much the standard I have. But Timothy said something. Can I tell a quick Uncle Dave story?
Let's go.
All right. I'm at the Under Armour All-American game. Ken Griffey's son is in that game. Did not deserve to be in that game.
Oh, yeah, the kid that went to Arizona, Trey Griffey. Yeah.
How did he end up doing? I can tell you without even knowing. Not well.
Yeah, he wasn't that good. It was Rich Rodriguez that year that he played for him.
Yeah, he shouldn't have been in that game. So, you know me, I'll go up to anybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I went up to Ken Griffey, who's sitting there watching on the sideline, and I'm like, hey, I wanted to do a story on your son. And I'm working for ESPN, for the love of Pete's sake. You would think he would talk to me. And I said, I wanted to do a story on your son. He goes, nah. I was like, well, I think it's a really cool story, especially considering you're here. And he would stand off alone by himself. And he's watching This is the other funny part. He's watching football like he knows what's going on. Okay. I'm just telling you. He didn't. And it was obvious. I mean, it just, anyway, very standoffish guy. I was very disappointed.
He's a very quiet guy. He was not built for the spotlight the way he got it in the 90s. Very kind of shy guy. Kind of emotional. You know, he was homesick his whole time playing in Seattle. And then so he went to Cincinnati, and then he got bitter when he was in Cincinnati, and he missed Seattle. So he emotionally went back to Seattle. I don't know who, like, if I could think of a Tennessee football player that's that way, that's kind of like, what emotional, sensitive, a little bit quiet, but very talented, but not really meant for the spotlight. Who would
I was going to say Rick Clausen until you threw in very talented. Changing gears, Timothy said, I've been saying about the play calling and receiver routes for 4 years, also less option routes, more timing routes. Now, Timothy, I'm curious kind of what you mean by that, because obviously things were going well 2 years ago. And I don't have as much of a problem with the routes that are being run, as long as they're being run enough over the middle of the field. I think that's the key to breaking up this dropping 3 or 4 into coverage. I think that's the key to opening up the running game. I just think that's going to do everything for this defense. You're going to have to have safeties. Corners that walk up and play a man, because right now they're not playing a man because they're scared they're going to get beat. And I'll say this, I thought the Vanderbilt route running and play calling was fantastic. So I didn't have a problem with that. Again, though, this is kind of funny how we're nitpicking, Caleb. I mean, Tennessee is in position, playing their best football to go and win a national championship.
Yeah, can I and I understand the criticism of Halsley. Can I defend him in one regard, though, for a second? Now, Nico's the best at doing this. But, guys, given where the offense was 2 years ago, they specifically went out of their way to not recruit quarterbacks who were accurate over the middle. They wanted the deep ball accuracy. So Nico's the best over the middle of the Hendon Hooker, Joe Milton, and Nico. I actually think he's better over the middle than either of the other two. But I actually don't think that's not his strength still. So it's hard to do that with the way defenses have adjusted, because that's not what you want to do. Your quarterbacks, you get them because they throw the deep ball well. So I know that's weird to say, but
okay,
I don't know if Nico, I said, was created in a lab for Heupel's offense. I said that because of his deep ball. If teams are going to make you throw over the middle, I'm not saying this to pick on Nico. I think Hendon Hooker would have the same issue. I don't think the quarterbacks that they go for are that adept at throwing over the middle.
Oh, I think Nico's very adept at throwing over the
Nico's the best of the three. I don't think he's typically drop back pure pocket passers running the pro style are the best. I don't think he's JJ McCarthy, put it that way. Last year at Michigan, I don't think he could do what JJ McCarthy could do over the middle.
Oh, I do.
I don't think he's Casey Clausen throwing over the middle.
Oh, I do.
I don't. I'm sorry. I think for Nico, it's the deep ball down the sideline is what he was recruited to do. And by the way, if teams are running this 3-3-5 2 years ago, Hendon Hooker would not be beloved in Tennessee. People would want him benched.
They wouldn't want him benched, but they think they had average quarterback play. I mean,
I don't know.
Who are you going to bench him for? Are you going to go back to Joe Milton and watch him?
Yes, people would want Joe Milton back in.
Well, everybody always wants the backup quarterback.
Exactly.
Let's talk some basketball. A little bit of hoops. Here we go. Tennessee is very likely going to be the number 1 team in the nation. But before I get to that, Timothy also added, means more crossing and running back slants, and use more tight ends for blocking, use curl routes. We're on the same page there, buddy. I'm with you on the crossing routes and those sorts of things. So again, thanks for the super chat for throwing that in there. Quincy Calhoun will get to go to college, and we're excited about that for Quincy and the Calhoun family.
Provided he's smart enough. I mean, I don't know if he's smart enough. So
that's right. Maybe just the
I'm never going to be the kid. I mean, I'm never going to be the parent. I don't ever want to be the parent that just thinks my kid is capable of anything, because I'm like, okay, then you might go down a path of you're not really good at this. Like, somebody should have told Jeremy Pruitt, you're not cut out for a head coach. His father should have told him, you're not meant to be a head coach. Look out for his best interests.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this too. You know what's funny now about kids? The kids, my son got made fun of for going to a 4-year institution like UMass.
Really?
Yeah, because now there's a thought that going to college is dumb because you end up with, even though he's on scholarship, but you end up with debt and you may not get a job, whereas you can go to trade school. And there's nothing against trade school. I'm just saying everybody has their own path. But there's this, there's just thought that trade school is the better option because you come out and you're immediately making $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 and you have no debt.
I do think college was over pushed on people like me and you, Dave, our generations. And I'm glad that people are kind of seeing now that we shouldn't just push it for no reason. Here's what I think with college. 4-year, 2-year, whatever's best for you. I don't think you should go to a 4-year school though, unless you want to do something that would require you to go to a 4-year school. Like we went to college and we're like, oh, we'll just go to college and we'll figure out what we want to do. I think it should be like, no, don't go to the 4-year school unless you know there's something that requires you to go to the 4-year school to do. Like your son wants to go to film school, so he needs to go to a 4-year school.
Right. Because, well, I've had some people tell me, that he should just get involved in it. But the bottom line is, in broadcasting, I mean, ESPN had to see my degree, or I wouldn't have gotten that job. I don't think Jimmy Himes would have hired me if I didn't have my degree. So
we wanted to go to.
I really need it, or real life experience, would that have helped me more? It would have helped me more.
I can tell you guys right now, journalism should be a 6-month track. It should not be a 4-year track for college. It's 6 months.
Oh, I would say 2 years, but anyway, but it doesn't need to be 4. I didn't need to be taking calculus 2, in which I cheated off my best friend from high school. But that worked. I actually got a B in that, and I thought.
By the way, I say the same thing for basketball, not football. You shouldn't have to go to college if you're an NBA player out of high school. Sorry, it is wasting everybody's time. Since we're talking about college basketball in a second, football is one thing. You should probably still have to go to college, but basketball, Dave, you shouldn't have to go to college if you're an NBA ready kid out of high school.
I love Adam. He goes, I went to a 4-year school to watch the Vols. It's gold. Gold, Jerry. Gold. All right, so let's get to this basketball team. You've extolled the virtues of this basketball team. I've kind of been like, I'm not sure. I've begun to get won over, and they could soon be the number 1 team in the nation. Why and how? I know a lot happened on Wednesday night.
When the rankings come out Monday, Tennessee will be number 1 in the AP poll, number 1 in the coaches poll, and number 1 in the net rankings, which is used in the NCAA tournament. And Dave still thinks they're not as good of a team as last year. He just thinks that,
I can admit when I'm wrong. I'm backing off. Come on.
So Tennessee entered this week number 3. And then Wednesday happened. And what happened on Wednesday? Auburn lost to Duke. And Duke's not going to bump Tennessee because they already have 2 losses. But Duke beat Auburn, so they're already saying Coach K who? I'm kidding. They're not saying that at Duke. And Kansas got upset by Creighton, losing by 13 points. Tennessee doesn't play again until Tuesday when they face Miami at Madison Square Garden, the Jimmy V Classic. So by default, Tennessee at number 3 is going to move up to number 1, and they're going to tip off in the Jimmy V Classic at the Garden on national TV Tuesday night on ESPN, the number 1 team in the nation.
It's pretty phenomenal. Our poll question is going to get changed up, and it is now, I'd rather Vols win Natty and Hoops or football in the championship game. Also, to wrap up our last poll question, getting David Sanders was a must, 69%, gravy, 30%. So let's get back to basketball. With this basketball team, even though you were high on them from the get, are they better and or further along than you thought they would be?
They're further along than I thought they would be. Because I thought this team was going to depend on Darling Stone Dubar developing into an elite player as he picked up Rick Barnes' system. It hasn't mattered because Chaz Lanier is freaking balling. Because Chaz Lanier is literally matching Dalton Connect's production from last year right now.
Unbelievable.
And yeah, this dude is incredible. I've told you guys, he is a slightly less athletic Dalton Connect. He actually kind of reminds me of not Dalton Connect. Why did I say that? John Morant, slightly less athletic John Morant. He kind of reminds me of, and I'm going to say this, the college version of Steph Curry, who is not, as you know, Dave, was not the
those are 2 way different players than John Morant and Steph Curry.
Steph Curry was much more of a slasher in college than a shooter. Remember?
Yeah, he was still the teardrop guy. I agree, but I mean, he
didn't become a shooter.
You're giving me 2 very different.
I'm giving you 6'3" guards that can score from anywhere on the court, and that are the go-to scoring.
I don't know that John Morant's that great of a shooter that he could do that.
Well, he was, and then he stopped being. He was getting better, and then he decided once he got his contract to stop working on his shooting, and he decided to work on his shooting in another way, if you know what I'm talking about. But I would say one of the reasons I'm high on Chaz Lanier is his work ethic to a degree. And this is where I get the Steph Curry. That's why I go more Steph Curry, not the John Morant, is whatever you want to say about Steph Curry. The work ethic to develop that shot, he had to be in the gym 12 hours a day, didn't he?
Oh, no question.
Yeah. And I think I've heard that Chaz Lanier has the same level of work ethic. And guys, this dude is an NBA star. He's an NBA star waiting to happen. And it's the second time in a row Rick Barnes found a kid at the lower level who wants to fine-tune his game by playing for Rick Barnes so he can have a chance at the NBA. And by fine-tuning his game, combined with the growth spurt he had last year, we're looking at we may be looking at the best player in college basketball. I'm going to go ahead and say that. We may be looking at the best player in college basketball. Chaz Lanier is incredible.
Wow. Pretty strong praise. Who has been the second most impressive player? If Lanier's number one, because we talked about how as an aggregate, maybe this team could be better, but it sounds like you think Chaz Lanier is just going to be better than Dalton Connect, which would make them a better basketball team almost subsequently. But your thoughts on Tennessee's second, third best basketball player? I mean, what do you think of the biggest roster or the rest of the roster?
So I'm very impressed by Igor Milicic Jr. And I'm not just impressed by his scoring, Dave. We expected him to be kind of the finesse stretch forward that could stretch the court. I think that what impresses me, though, is he can play physical under the basket. He's averaging 7 rebounds a game. And so if Barnes wants to use Milicic for a size advantage, he can say, hey, Igor, get under the basket with Felix Opera, and you two both just dominate the boards, and they'll do it. And that really stands out to me. So he's the second most. Zakai Ziegler has actually been a bit of a drop off this year, but it doesn't matter as much because he does so many. Zakai Ziegler is that guy. I mean, Dave, we know him. We all know this guy. You see it on football teams a lot. He's going to make 17 mistakes in a game, but you still love him because he plays so hard.
Yeah, true. My question for Igor, is he going to step out even more, or is his role going to be defined as underneath the basket? How versatile can he be? I'd like to see him straight down the middle, 50% on the post, 50% willing to step out and shoot that three. I think it makes Tennessee incredibly tough to defend. Now, you do have to give me this. I was very high on Igor headed into this season. As a matter of fact, higher than Darling Stone or Chaz. So I think his game is the one that, from what we've seen to this point, has the most room and potential to grow. You've already seen enough of Chaz Lanier where you think he's like an All-American top, right?
At least the last 3 games. I wasn't saying that about Chaz Lanier at the start of the season, but what I've seen from him in the last 3 games.
Okay, so Dubar, we don't know much about because he hadn't played that much. But with Igor, I've seen enough of him where I think he's good now. He could be very good or like incredible.
Yes. I think the way they're going to use Igor is based on who they're playing at the time. He's a matchup problem for either team because, Dave, when you get to the NCAA tournament and what's been Rick Barnes' Achilles heel, he always lost to lower seeds from mid-majors in the NCAA tournament, right? And what he can do this year, though, is when he runs into one of those teams, they typically run 4 guards when their power forward is 6'5". He's going to say, Igor, go get under the basket. Go get under the basket and just use your size and outmuscle them. But then when they go and play Kentucky, who's very athletic this year, when they play Auburn, who's very athletic, Rick Barnes is going to slow down the offense and have Igor play at the stretch 4 spot and make Auburn defend the entire perimeter.
Yep. And
that's going to be more difficult. So I think look, they're very versatile. I said this team would be as good as last year. I'm leaning maybe, if I had to gamble on a national title team right now, I would put my money on Tennessee. If I had to bet on a team to win the national title in college basketball right now, my money would be on Tennessee.
Pull up those odds while I share the poll question, which is pretty good, brought to you by Chattanooga Mortgage. Congratulations, your home search just got easier. Buying a home in Chattanooga has never been easier. Chat Mortgage, chat with 2 T's, mortgage.com. our poll question. Whoa! Sometimes I get genuinely surprised. I know you want more success out of football, which makes sense because it's 90% of the budget, and it's what you show up 100,000 people. I mean, they couldn't get 100,000 for a basketball game, even if they had the room. And then, so I'd rather Vols win Natty and hoops, football be in the national championship game. 69% say they'd rather football be in the national championship game. 33% say win a national championship in hoops. Which would Caleb give the Vols more national exposure? Because ultimately, what you want is exposure to help you build a program, to help you recruit, to help your NIL guys get more money. What do you think would be bigger from an exposure standpoint?
Football in the championship game. I'd rather football win one game in the playoff than anything else happen ever. I mean, if I'm a fan of Tennessee, if I'm a fan of any college at this level, I'd rather football win one game. I'd rather football make the college football playoff. Put it this way. I'd rather the football team make the college football playoff and the basketball team lose every single game on its schedule. Go 0 and whatever. Philip Fulmer once said football's the engine that drives the train. And he was right because he's trying to say football's the heart. But he undersold how important football is. I think football's the battery in an electric car, Dave. If you have an electric car, football's the battery, which is literally the whole car, basically.
Right. Which means
football's the battery.
Which means it can explode on the freeway, which it did back in 2009, yes. Right?
Football is the battery in an electric car. Basketball is what? I don't know, like the tires, maybe? Football's the tires. Yeah,
the transmission. Do you know anything about cars?
I'm saying, does an electric car still have a transmission?
Yeah, you've got to have a transmission. You've got to have a way to get the energy to the wheels.
Well, football's still that. Football's the transmission, the battery, the electric car's the hood. Just the hood.
And I want everybody to remember that Caleb just asked, does an electric car have a transmission?
I don't know cars, guys. I'm sorry. Okay, guys, y'all already don't see me as enough of a Southerner. I don't know cars and I don't know guns. I've never held a gun in my life. And by the way, I never will because I'm scared to death of guns. I'm for anybody's right to have a gun if they want it, but you will never see me touch a gun.
Okay. All right. Let's get on Caleb's liberalism here for just a second.
I didn't say that. I just said I'm scared of them.
All right.
I just said, I want anybody who wants a gun should be allowed to have it. I just don't want it for me personal.
Amen. Personally. All right. Stat of the day is what? Caleb Calhoun. Yes, what?
I wanted to give the odds real quick.
Okay, yeah.
Because anybody who wants to gamble their son's college tuition away should be allowed to do that too. But
yes,
guys, you guys should bet on Tennessee. And by the way, I'm allowed to tell you to bet on Tennessee, and you can't sue me if you bet on them and don't get it right. Okay, so but I'm going to say this, Dave. Guess Tennessee's odds to win the Natty right now in basketball. Just guess.
Oh, I'll say 20-1.
You actually guessed a little higher. It's 15-1. They're plus 1,500.
Are you kidding me? That's like really good.
And guess what? There are 4 teams ahead of them right now. Duke is the highest. I don't know how Duke is, but Duke's the highest, tied with Auburn. Those are the 2 highest at plus 900. Gonzaga at plus 1,100, and Houston's tied with Tennessee at plus 1,500. Guys, you're getting a steal. Take your mortgage, take out a second mortgage, and bet on Tennessee to win the Natty. Seriously, take out a second mortgage on your house right now and put it on Tennessee to win the Natty.
You did say that with Nico and the Heisman, by the way.
Yeah, well, we're not going to talk about that.
Okay.
I still on FanDuel, it's like your futures bets, because that's technically not settled yet, and I still get the reminder that I bet on him to win the Heisman. But yes, no. Bet your mortgage. Bet your second mortgage on Nico winning, on Tennessee winning the national championship in basketball.
All righty. He's the one, the only, the Caleb Calhoun. Stat of the day is what? Our stat of the day is brought to you by our fantastic friend, and it's still open enrollment, Medicare Misty.
I've been in business actually 19 years this year. I've been in the community since 1993. You're getting a lot of information. Unlike when you were working, they made the choice for you. Now you have to make the choice. Come to us and let us help you make it easy. Call Medicare Misty, MedicareMisty.com or 423-777-5577. Let us help them sleep at night.
And we call her Medicare Misty.
Stat of the day, Caleb Calhoun. What do you got?
Okay, so this year Tennessee has given up 13.9 points per game on defense. Now we don't know if that average will hold once the playoff hits. But Dave, guess the last time Tennessee gave up fewer than 15 points a game on defense. Guess the year.
You know, the guy who wrote the book that you can order online at offthehooksports.com, Celebrate 98, the untold stories behind Tennessee's 1998 national championship, wants to say 98, but I feel like I would have already heard that stat, so I'm not sure.
You're close.
99. 99.
Yes, it was 99. They gave up 13.6 points per game in 99. Truth be told, it's interesting you bring up 98, Dave, because Tennessee won games. They averaged 31.4 points a game and gave up 13.3 in 98. They averaged 29 points a game and gave up 13.6 in 99. The clear drop-off from 98 to 99 wasn't on defense. It was on offense. They were a significantly inferior team without David Cutcliffe as offensive coordinator. And I know T. Martin is beloved, and I hold him in high regard, but look, I know a little more of the story. Randy Sanders wanted to turn T. Martin loose in 99, and T. Martin wasn't good when they turned him loose. There's a reason they had to keep the harness on T. Martin in 98, because he wasn't that good when you turned him loose.
Well, it wasn't just that. I mean, and I would say this with Randy in the room. When it came to game planning, which is way more important than play calling, people think that, play calling, he went for it on fourth down or he didn't. No, you really set up a game plan so that you know exactly what to do in those situations. Like, you don't even have to think about it. So
yes,
when it came to game planning and all that, David Cutcliffe was one of the best to ever do it in the SEC, and Randy was just good at it. He wasn't elite.
Was he even good? I mean,
yeah, I mean, he got enough. I mean, he helped them get to the 2001 SEC championship game. Now that offense was loaded. So
I was going to say, I mean, we're talking about being good, but that was see, I didn't even find Cutcliffe great. The thing that, and maybe you were right, maybe it was, my thought on Cutcliffe was what made him so good was he was so good at, I see him as the Rick Barnes of college football, which is he developed you so well fundamentally.
No. It was really, he put defenders in a bind. He put safeties especially in a bind where they weren't sure who to guard, who to cover, and he did a lot of things schematically that were just next level. He and I used to talk. He and I don't know if you know this. He and I did a radio show.
Yeah, I remember telling me that.
So
y'all did it the year Tennessee's offense fell apart under Randy Sanders.
Yeah, it's almost like he was pining for that job. So anyway,
Randy Sanders should have. That was whatever you want to say about Fulmer. He went down with his staff. He was so loyal to his staff, he let them basically derail the second half of his career because he didn't want to fire guys.
Well, with Pat Washington and Larry Slade.
And Randy Sanders. Randy Sanders was not an offensive coordinator.
He got rid of Randy Sanders.
He should have done it like the program was already in free fall by the time he got rid of Randy Sanders. He should have done it 3 years before he did.
Philip Fulmer may still be the head coach at Tennessee if he'd have hired Gus Malzahn that year, who, by the way, was leading Tulsa as their offensive coordinator to the #1 offense in the nation. But instead, he went with Dave Clawson because he thought he could control him, and he knew he'd have to turn things over to Gus. Boom. That's what happened. We're talking about Philip Fulmer being the all-time
he would have had another national title because he would have gotten Cam Newton.
Quite possibly that, too.
Yeah, he'd have had another national title, so he'd have two.
He'd have coached that long. He just wanted to win. I think it's 24 more games to get to Neyland's record. That was the goal. All right, so stay tuned. Oli Lane coming up, former Vol. We love visiting with him. The show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com.
Sports Treasures in North Knoxville is one of the South's largest sports cards and memorabilia dealers, featuring over 10 million sports cards from vintage to modern. Sports Treasures carries a full line of hobby boxes, singles, autographed memorabilia, Tennessee Vol collectibles, fan cave decorations, and so much more. See a museum full of collectibles at Sports Treasures, 4819 North Broadway in Fountain City, and Sports Treasures on Facebook. Sports Treasures, where the real sports fan goes to shop.
Community banking is about location and much more. It's about family. We reside in your community. We are a part of your community. At Commercial Bank, our commitment extends beyond the walls of our branches. It's displayed each day in the opportunities we provide, the money we give back, and the time we commit, all to help improve the lives of the people, families, and businesses that make our communities great. Commercial Bank, life made better.
Double D Piping provides full-service fire protection on any scale. From residential homes to government facilities, we can assist any customer through design, fabrication, installation, inspection, and demonstration of fire suppression systems. With 30 years of service across 5 states and a full staff with over 40 years experience, our quality can't be beaten. Don't get caught watching what you could have prevented. Call Double D Piping, the absolute best in fire prevention.
With our brand new location on Emory Road, Eye Care Optical is bringing East Tennessee's best eye care to your neighborhood. Doctors Johnston and Combs offer unmatched expertise and care without a trip to Knoxville. Eye Care Optical, now in Powell.
Are you ready to get strong? At NFC, we offer top-notch weight training and functional fitness, so you can build strength and improve your performance. Join today at nfc1.com or stop by any one of our 7 East Tennessee locations.
When the lights turn on and the game begins, you need a team that gets the job done. It's Ford commercial truck season at Varner Ford in Clinton, where our strong lineup is built for power and performance. Step up your game in this new 24 F-150 4x4 Super Crew, $46,997. It's at 250 cargo van, $50,950. 24 Ford Maverick XLT Hybrid, $28,929.
Local you trust, performance you can afford. Varner Ford, built for the game.
What the? What was he thinking? Release the hounds. The Dave Hooker Show. Keep cool. A presentation of OffTheHookSports.com.
What the H today is, what the H was I thinking because I hit the wrong darn button. He's Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker, the show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com. I want to take a second to tell you about Sports Treasures. I was there yesterday. Sports Treasures carrying over 5 million sports treasures and so much more. Follow on Facebook for the best sports memorabilia, daily updates, and they're fantastic. Sports Treasures TN on Facebook. Sports Treasures TN. They had this thing that it's a print of Batman, and it's like a super cool drawing of Batman, and it's autographed. My son doesn't watch the show. He doesn't follow college football because the boobs like Derek Dooley and Butch Jones and Jeremy Pruitt ruined it for him in his adolescence. So thanks a lot, Jack Wagons. But he does love comic books like I did when I was a kid. So they had this, they've got this Batman print, and it's autographed by the actual artist that did it. So that's what he's getting for Christmas. So I can tell you that.
You know what the great irony of Batman is?
What?
Bruce Wayne hoards all this wealth, which creates a level of inequality that causes crime in Gotham. And then he goes and promises to protect Gotham from the crime that is created because he hoards all the money.
That's the most idiotic take I've ever heard. And I love you like a brother.
Batman's an IRS audit away from losing all his power.
UPS store. That actually is probably the funniest line you've ever said. He's a more athletic Donald Trump. The UPS store, Hardin Valley, helping individuals and small businesses, wide range of products and services, locally owned and operated. Yeah, I'm gonna throw that on my son, who I can't wait to get home for the Christmas break. He's all the way up there in UMass. You know, they don't even know. Like, none of his friends know when there's a football game on campus.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, they go to hockey games, but they don't do that.
Do you know that John Calipari's first job was at UMass, and he took them to the Final Four? And then John Chaney the great legendary Temple coach, cussed him out in a press conference one time?
Oh, I absolutely know that. What do you think? I'm a moron? Yeah. The thing that was funny to me is that they still celebrate, and you can buy a shirt of Marcus Camby, which
technically didn't ever play there.
I mean, who wants to buy a shirt of Marcus Camby? Is anybody aware that Dr. J went to UMass?
I did not know that. Wait, he did? I didn't even know that.
Wouldn't that be what you sold? I mean,
yes,
that's what I would push.
I mean, much more than Marcus Camby.
Yeah, I was like, where's the Dr. J? We're off topic. Rick Terry Jewelry Design. They want to be your jeweler looking for affordable game day jewelry, a Tennessee tradition. RickTerryJewelry.com. That is RickTerryJewelry.com. All right, Caleb. So as we change gears just a bit, Oli Lane is going to join us at a different time. So he's going to be at the here in just a few minutes, actually. Now, you have proposed this a couple of different times, and it perplexes me because I'm just not of the it's okay to lose mentality. And I'm certainly not of the mentality that you advocate losing. But you legitimately think that teams should try to lose the conference championship games. Caleb, I'm going to give you an opportunity to convince me before I say
that's crazy.
So, and I'm going to give you a fair opportunity at it. So go for it. What do you got?
All right, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to start by saying this before any of you guys called me a liberal commie. College, you're defending the institution of college football that literally has a system designed to punish success. College football punishes success and rewards failure. Okay. And let me tell you how it punishes success.
Okay.
If you go win your conference championship game, you have a tougher road to the national title than if you lose your conference championship game. That is the very definition of punishing success. And so when Oregon goes and plays Penn State this weekend, and when Georgia goes and plays Texas, let's just take Oregon and Penn State. If Oregon wins, oh, congratulations, they beat Penn State. Now they get a first round bye. In the second round, they're going to have to play Tennessee or Ohio State on a neutral field in the Rose Bowl. If Oregon loses, you know what they get to do, Dave?
Lay it on me.
They get to play Arizona State at home in the first round. And then they get to play Boise State on a neutral field in the second round, maybe SMU. Dave, would you rather play Tennessee or Ohio State once or Arizona State at home and then Boise State on a neutral field?
Okay, I'm going to tell you that if this were basketball, I think you would have a better argument. But given that it's football, no, I'm not going to add an extra game. I think that in and of itself, that's where you and I are going to differ philosophically. In and of itself, I think adding a football game is much more difficult. And so I would not want to do that. So you're not going to be able to convince me otherwise.
You are adding a football game, though, because, Dave, here's the problem. To get that bye, Oregon has to beat Penn State, right?
Yes.
Isn't that the extra football game?
Well, the conference, but they have to be in the conference.
So here's my point.
You're saying?
If they rest all their starters this weekend, if I'm Oregon, I rest all of my starters. That's a bye, right? At that point, that's the same as a bye. You're not playing the game with your starters.
Okay, so you're saying be overt about it. Don't put your – now, that to me is akin to some sort of big monstrous revolt. I mean, that you're going to get fined. You're going to get God knows what. How are you going to get fined?
What are you doing? You're not breaking any rules. You're looking out for the best of your team. I did not destroy the conference championship games. Oregon, Georgia, and Texas. If I'm Georgia, I'm not – Carson Beck's not seeing the field this weekend. Okay, if I'm Texas, this is a great time to get Arch Manning a little more development. If I'm Texas,
now, hold on. Again, you're going down a basketball path because if you're going to throw them out there, if you're going to throw Arch Manning out there, you have to have the starters around him to properly evaluate him and protect him. So it's not as simple as just one guy.
No, you haven't played with the backup.
You either go mass subs or you don't sub at all and you go my way and try to win.
I'm going mass subs. And if Arch Manning gets wrecked, then he learns a little bit about the difficulties of playing football, which is good for him too. I'm saying, you know what? I'm putting either all my backups in. I'm dead serious. If I'm Texas or Oregon, I'm putting all of my backups in, not even trying to win, or crazy enough, Red Bull, you water boy, how you like my new offense? I'm kneeling it 3 times and punting. And then I am just playing a prevent defense and not trying to tackle.
Steve says shelf the conference championship games. I think we're going in that direction.
No, we're not.
Well, not until they find another way to replace the revenue is what I was going to say. If they find some other way to replace the revenue, then quite possibly. And I tell you what, I wouldn't be against, those preseason classic games that they used to have. Remember those?
Yes.
I wouldn't be opposed to that. Here's the bottom line. You have teams playing a different number of games leading into the national tournament. That's the ultimate problem, isn't it?
It's a huge problem. And this is the issue. And so, like, okay, if you're Oregon or Georgia or Texas, maybe Georgia, if you're Georgia, you may try to win because you don't know if the committee is going to punish you for a loss. They say they won't, but you really can't take that seriously. But if you're Texas or Oregon, you know you'll at worst be a 5 or a 6 seed. Why even try to win? Because you have to win the conference championship game to get that bye, or you could just not play in the conference championship game, which would count as the bye. It works either way, and you get an easier road. I'm sorry. Throw it. Tank it. Oregon, Texas, if you're listening to me, throw the championship game this weekend. Make Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti look like idiots because they have been ridiculous with how they've set up this playoff format.
Our poll question is up now, brought to you by Quality Tire Pros, serving Chattanooga's community since 1957. All major brands of tires, full service automotive, brake alignments, oil changes, and more. QualityTirePros.com, QualityTirePros.com. Tell Bo and the gang that Dave Hooker and Caleb Calhoun said, hey, Bo, so will you watch conference championship games? Yes, great football, 84%. No, they're like old bowl games now. 16%. So the interest is there. If you were to kill that golden goose that only happens once a year, and we're talking about conference championship games, that's the way to kill it. I mean, you just basically, if you do what you do, if you're talking about, you run over it, you back over the goose, and then you run over it again. I used to have a buddy that would do that on the back roads when he saw a snake because he hated snakes.
All right, so I got a question about if you were to agree with me on this, would your strategy? And I know you don't because you're like, you gotta try to win every game, you gotta play hard all the time.
I've never spoken like that, not one time.
If you're me, Dave, if you agree with me, how would you throw it? Would you do like Rick Barnes in the basketball tournament last year and just be like, we're going to have a very bare game plan of not really trying to win? Or would you would you openly throw it?
There are two. Well, I guess I'd openly throw it because I wouldn't put my players in jeopardy. If I had to choose, like if the athletic director came down and said, you have to throw this game because we can make some sort of protest and change and get rid of this stupid thing so that we're all on the same playing field, then no, I'm not even putting my players out there. I'm certainly not doing what Rick Barnes did, which was, I think, a pretty simplistic approach to the SEC tournament because you're more likely to get hurt in football. I can't look a man in the eye and say, go out there and battle for me. And sorry if you get hurt because we're running the most vanilla, pathetic game plan of all time. And everybody's going to know what you're doing. And you're going to get ear-holed and decleated over and over and over. I can't do that.
Okay, so what about this? Okay, so would you forfeit or would you just put all your backups in?
Well, I mean,
I would actually consider forfeiting.
I mean,
I would just say I'm not going to show up and I forfeit. You guys can have this. I don't want it.
Okay, let's get Oli Lane's thoughts on this. We're actually going to talk to Oli Lane about road games and should Tennessee be concerned at all about possibly going on the road to play Ohio State because Tennessee hasn't been the best road team. But first, Oli, thank you for joining us. How are you, sir?
No, I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Great. I think we can all agree that the conference championship game is a little wanky now with the way the college football playoff works. But can you ever imagine throwing a game?
No, I mean, I couldn't imagine just going out and throwing a game, and especially maybe not this soon. I could see it some, like obviously in basketball, because it's different. It's a different kind of environment. But I mean, with football, it's just like there's still a lot that's tied to this championship game for some teams to like be able to get into the playoffs. But then too, it's just like it's a pride thing. I think football wise, it's just like you can't go out there and throw a game. You're never going to feel good about yourself if you don't give all you got into a single game. But I mean, I'm with you guys. I don't think the championship games really have a place in college football anymore. They were great. It's a lot of fun. I mean, especially the SEC championship game, that's the pinnacle of conference championships, but they just, with how long seasons are now and the way they're trying to structure everything, it just doesn't make sense. Whoever's got the best record in the conference, here's a little conference championship. You win. You're the best in the conference, and let's move along. But I mean, especially like I've been talking with a bunch of people this week. It's just like, man, it's just such a long season for these kids. And I mean, granted, when you're in the pros, you're playing these long seasons because that's what you get paid for. That's all your focus is for the entire year. But I mean, with college kids, you got school, you got all this other stuff that's going on that on top of that, you got to throw, well, now we're throwing 4 or 5 more games onto you. So, I mean, that's not really a good way to go about it. I mean, I think if you eventually just get rid of the conference championships itself, you'd probably have more longevity to be able to handle some of these injury stuffs that happen throughout the year. And I mean, you're just giving them more time to be more competitive when they get to the playoffs. Because I mean, you're going to see some teams, I'm sure, that are just tired by the time they hit game 2 or game 3 in the playoffs. And it's not even a talent issue. It's just hey, we're tired. It's been a long season and these guys haven't had to play this long, this deep before.
Okay, Oli, let me ask you this. If you were still playing and Tennessee was in the SEC championship game, would it be hard to get focused knowing that really your seeding's kind of already set? I mean, I think that Georgia can drop some, but I don't think they're going to drop below Tennessee. I think Oregon can drop some, but they're not going to drop that far just because of I think the college football playoff pretty much has their mind made up.
Yeah, I mean, the only motivation for me to win that game is just to get that bye. I mean, if you win the game and you get that automatic top 4 seed in the bye, I mean, that's really big, especially gives you an extra week to kind of take a breath and know that you're in a solidified spot to at least hit a bowl game that's structured in the playoffs. That's the one thing, too, that I haven't understood yet with how these playoffs are structured. These teams that go in the first round and lose at one of the either at home or at another place, is there a bowl gift reward type thing that goes into that, or is the season done? Congratulations to making it on the playoffs. You don't get anything. You had to get to the second round when the bowl games come into a factor to get the rewards that you get for having a good season, because that was always the biggest thing about going to the bowl game is you get rewards, you get gifts, presents, stuff like that. I mean, that was the big part of the motivation for a bowl game to get to bowl games is to get that kind of stuff. So seems like a raw deal to me for some of these teams that are going to lose in the first round. You don't get anything. You just pat on the back. Congratulations, you made it to the playoffs. But
I hadn't thought about that. What's the best bowl gift you ever got, Ollie?
I don't know. I mean, the Orange Bowl had a lot of really good gifts. I got a nice little gaming monitor from there that I use all the time. But I've gotten, it's just a bunch of cool little like nidbit stuff. Like when we went to Tax Slayer Bowl, like I got this giant, huge scrapbook thing of like all the history of the bowl games, and then I've always got a nice little bowl watch that goes with it. I mean, it's just the little things that go along with it that make it interesting and fun to be a part of it. Get some memorabilia from being in those kind of games.
I feel like if you go to the Tax Slayer Bowl, that bowl should just agree to pay every player's taxes for the next 10 years.
Yeah, right. Just hey, we'll do free tax returns for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
well, with NIL, it's not the worst idea in the world.
No, not at all.
Ollie, let me just push back on you on the buy real quick, because here's my issue with the buy and the whole concept of it. Because that's what they're trying to tell you. They're trying to put up this facade of, if you win your conference championship game, you get the buy. Or you could just not play your conference championship game, which is a buy on its own.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of either way, you have to play an extra game, right?
No, I mean, you're not wrong. But I mean, it's just, to me, especially like if you hit that conference championship, if you're still in a position where you're not in the conference championship, now you're kind of guessing if you're going to get in or not get into the playoffs. But I feel like if you get that conference championship, I don't see the committee just dropping out runner-ups that have decent records. So, I mean, maybe that's another tie-in to it, that they're not going to drop out the conference runner-up in those championship games. But, I mean, they're going to have to, like you said, make it a little bit more enticing to want to continue to play these kind of games, because in the future it's going to wear out a lot of these kids, and how long these seasons are going to get drawn out.
We were able to get a quote from Peyton Manning and his thoughts on Caleb Calhoun's just throwing bowl games. Peyton, what did you have to say?
They're like, that is total bullshit.
Let me ask you guys just this real quick, and I this is actually more David, Ali. I'd love your thoughts too. I'm going to give two coaches, and you tell me if you think that they would just be willing to outright show up the SEC by not even trying to win and just kneeling 3 times and punting or even forfeiting. Lane Kiffin, would he do it?
That's the only one. Ollie,
that's the only one that I could think of, because I've already heard him talk about that in a press conference somewhere. But that's probably the only one that I would think of.
What about, and Dave, more for you, Steve Spurrier? Come on, he would do it.
No, Ollie, I think, and I'm a little older, he'd grop about it all week, and he'd say it was stupid, and that might undermine his team's desire. But he's too much of a competitor. He was bragging at SEC Media Days a couple of years ago. He was bragging about how the Apollo Knights in the All-American Football League, do you remember that short-lived thing? He's bragging about how they still had the most wins, and he's waiting on his trophy. And he was being dead serious. Ollie, he was like,
I bet he was.
Still don't have my trophy. Still don't have it. Still, I'm waiting on my trophy. And we had the most wins. So no, he wouldn't do it. Ollie, let's change gears here for a second, and let's get serious. Tennessee has not been the best road team. You've been a part of some of those teams that have sometimes struggled on the road. The argument could be that offense doesn't travel as well as, let's say, a team that's based more on defense and the ground game. But why do you think there have been times in which you and Tennessee has struggled on the road?
I mean, I definitely think that, all in all, the main thing is just a lot of these road environments that we have to go to are challenging environments. Everyone was talking about how challenging of an environment it is for fans to come to Neyland. I mean, it's replicated a lot. Like, I know Neyland's a special place, but I mean, it's replicated a lot in a lot of these different environments across college football. A lot of fans are super passionate about their teams. And so, I mean, that always is like the number one aspect of why it's challenging to win on the road. I think there is some issues with how this offense transitions from a home environment to a road environment, just in terms of communication wise. Everything for the offense happens so fast that, I mean, you have to make sure that everybody's getting everything right at the right time, and getting the right information, getting the right inputs. And then, I mean, you also got the whole ball mechanics aspect of it that makes it difficult. And just in turn, just playing difficult opponents as well. But I mean, for what they have structured, they have gotten continuously better. Tennessee historically has always had an issue. Teams historically have always had an issue of going on the road and winning. And I see that they're improving on it to a point, and it's just time to hit that next hurdle and jump over that next hurdle of getting it. And, I like the mentality that, just speaking of like going into this playoff stuff and the chance of us having to travel, I like the mentality that I heard Coach Heupel talk about earlier this week. He's like, if you don't have the thought of anywhere, anytime, any place, then you're just coming to have a cup of coffee in the playoffs. You're not here to make any noise. And if that's the mentality that he's preaching to them and to the team, then I mean, I feel very confident in our abilities to go out and do anything. Because I mean, that's how you have to be in the playoffs. Anytime, any place, anywhere, we're going to show up and we're going to kick your tails and we're going to move on. And that's what you got to do, and that's what you got to attack it as.
So, Ollie, and I'm not going to make you call out any of your teammates, don't worry. But I don't think it's controversial to say that this defense this year for Tennessee is significantly better than the defenses you were playing with at Tennessee. How much easier is it for the offense if the defense is up to snuff in road games, because they can help take the crowd out of the game by not letting the offense go off? I mean, I just point out the South Carolina game a couple of years ago. The crowd was never out of it because Spencer Rattler was scoring a touchdown every time he had the ball.
Yeah, no, I mean, it definitely helps a ton because, I mean, especially with how explosive our offense can be, when you're on the road and you're in a shootout, the fans are never going to be out of it. So you're not only just battling that team's defense, but the fans the whole time. But when you have a stout defense like we do this year, and they're able to get stops, get turnovers, do this big hits here and there, it does a lot for the offense of just continuing to have confidence throughout the game. And if the offense doesn't score on a drive, then they can not fret and freak out and worry, oh, we didn't score, they're going to come back or something. It's like, no, our defense has got us. We're going to get the ball back. We're just going to play football. You see it a lot, especially like this year. I think you've seen the offense slower to getting to that kind of desperation moment where they're all trying to like overextend and make huge efforts because they know the defense has got them in their back pocket. They're going to take care of them. And they've done that for a majority of the season. Obviously had some issues at Georgia that throughout the game, they scored more points than anybody else that we've played against. But, I think they're doing the right things. And like you said, it's nice to have the defense to protect you. Because, I think back at South Carolina at 22, and, obviously you don't want to say anything, but when you score 38 points on the road, especially in the SEC, you feel like that's a game you're supposed to win. But, you look back at it, there's a lot of different factors that went into what South Carolina's success was for that game. But
not saying they were cheating, but
yeah, not saying it, no. But I think in the grand scheme of things, just having the defense to protect you, especially offensively, and this year with an offense that has had some ups and downs in their struggles, it helps continue to have that confidence that you're still going to be in a game no matter what, because your defense is going to keep you there. And it's just the offense now doesn't have to focus on, well, we're the ones holding us in the game. It's like, well, no, we're in the game. We just have to play. We just have to relax and play. We don't have to make any of these overextending efforts to keep us in the game because our defense is going to do that for us.
As far as this defense and what they're able to do, I hate this saying, but when people say, oh, you want to go out there and get off to a fast start, nobody says, hey, let's go out there and have a really terrible first quarter.
Yeah.
Nobody's, have you ever been a part of a meeting where anybody said that?
Yeah. It's like, no, hey, we're going to get up about halfway through the second, start getting some stuff going, warm up, get ready for third quarter. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and bleep the bed in the first quarter, sleep through it and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll ask you this, with this defense in particular, to make a play, to do something, a game-changing play, and I'm not talking about a pick six necessarily or a strip sack, but just a tackle for a loss that leads to a punt. How much can that set the tone to kind of get the Vols rolling? And we're assuming, and we don't know yet, but we're assuming that they end up in Columbus. That's a loud, excited crowd. If there were one thing that Tennessee would need to do early to kind of quell the crowd and quell the nerves that Tennessee is going to have, and everybody has nerves. Would that rank towards the top, or what would?
Yeah, just anything that's I would classify as like a high energy explosive play. And defensively, that's easier to get than offensively because you got to get free on one play and just lay the hammer on somebody, and which our defense does a lot, especially in the first half. They're always a little bit more aggressive to get back there in the backfield, and they're all fresh and ready to go for the game. I think those are the plays that, especially when you go in a road environment, help set the tone. The first quarter is really just setting the tone for what the game's going to be, especially your first drive or two. And so, if defense is the first one out there, they got to set the tone for the game, for how they're going to play it, or they're going to be smack mouth, they're going to hit somebody, try to get turnovers or something. But one of those, like you were saying, a high explosive play kind of helps tone the crowd down a little bit, and then brings the motivation of the sideline up. And as long as you can keep your sideline up throughout the entire game, the fan aspect is going to matter less and less because the hype of the sideline, if you're coming over the sideline, everybody's always hyping you up, motivating you. It goes a long way. I've been a part of some teams at Tennessee where the sidelines were completely dead quiet. Nobody's trying to hype anybody up or keep everybody locked into the game. And that's something that Heupel's done a really good job of just forcing the teammates, and not even forcing, but highly, highly encouraging them to continue to have, if you're not in the game, if you're not part of the game plan today, just being there for your teammates and keeping them motivated and hyped up and energized for the game. And that helps a ton. And then those are the guys that are helping to point out when a big play's happen, that everybody on the sidelines getting hyped up for it and excited for it, and passing that that motivation, that energy around everybody.
Bank on It, brought to you by Oli, brought to you by our friends at Commercial Bank. They bring you Oli Lane. I could have told you right then to bank on it. Ollie's not going to say throw a game. Give us 30 seconds off the Hook Sports.
Commercial Bank is your neighborhood bank. What makes us different from other banks? We understand that every customer has unique opportunities, challenges, and financial concerns. We don't expect you to fit into the same box as the next person or business. Whether it's purchasing a home, saving for your child's future, or planning for your next vacation, we're with you every step of the way to navigate life's big decisions. Commercial Bank.
I should have said bank on it that Caleb's not going to let this go. Go ahead, Caleb.
Oli, you didn't come back in time.
No.
We saw your sink.
Yeah.
So that's a delay of game, by the way.
Penalty.
So
he moved the ball.
What about? I want to ask you this from an SEC perspective, because I think one thing that Tennessee may be in for a rough shocker for is this doesn't apply to the Big Ten, which is that the difference between a noon road game and a 8 o'clock at night road game. I maintain that y'all's win at LSU in 2022, that Dave and I both said whatever the line was, it should have moved 7 points in Tennessee's favor because it was a noon game. And anybody who's been down there knows that LSU fans are way too hungover to cheer on 11 a.m.
Yeah.
Is that your experience in the SEC, noon versus 8 p.m. games?
Yeah, no doubt. I think I talked about it a little bit. I can't remember where last week, but yeah, I mean, having those road games at noon changed the aspect in the SEC for sure. I mean, it's just, I don't know if just at the SEC, obviously party country or something, but I mean, there's a different aspect when you give fans an entire day to get ready for a game and build up the excitement versus it's like the first thing in the morning. That's what they're rolling into is the time of the game. So, I mean, I think that helps a lot, but obviously, like you're saying with the Big Ten, it's the Big Ten or
Big noon kickoff.
Big noon kickoff, which I've never understood why they would have their best games start at noon and get them out of the way early. But I mean, yeah, I mean, their fans and their teams are not shy to playing at noon games and being hyped up, ready to go, and attacking teams that aren't used to. I mean, we're used to having noon games, but I mean, obviously, we've had a stretch this year of night games because everybody loves watching the balls at night. And so, I mean, it's definitely going to be something that's maybe not be as much of in our favor if we have to travel up there and play at noon. It's not that the time difference isn't going to be as much of a benefit as it would be traveling in the SEC for sure.
Yeah, to your point, Oli, my wife's from Wisconsin, so I've been there plenty of times. I went to a Packer game one time, rode a party bus to Green Bay. They prefer noon games because it gets really, really cold in the evening. And so they drink a lot more in the Midwest and the South. I'll just say that because it's cold. So they don't get hungover because they just make sure they stay drunk, and they just go ahead and get drunk again at 5 a.m. if they're hungover from the night before.
I mean, I guess that's a good practice.
Yeah.
No, they are. I was on a party bus to Green Bay, and at 6 a.m, they were 55, 60-year-old women were handing out Jello shots, and they were like, "Can y'all hang?" And I'm like, "I can't hang."
Yes.
No, it is the upper Midwest is just alcohol. It's like Russia with its alcoholism.
Wow. I did not know that. Way to go ahead and stereotype an entire region of our nation. All right.
I love it. It's fun. My wife's whole family's from there.
Yeah. I still remember I still remember walking to a Notre Dame game. And I think it was when Tennessee played Notre Dame, and I think it was an early kickoff. I know it seemed early. And I remember looking over, and this guy's yelling at us to come over. Now, we're working media. I'm not going to go over there and drink, especially not at 11 a.m.
Yeah.
But I remember him having, I'm not talking about like 5 or 6 bars. He had it. The guy had 4 of those long tables, those folding tables, and he had anything you wanted. I don't care.
Wow.
I don't care if it was vodka, tequila, different kinds of bourbon. I mean, it was all
that's crazy
there.
Yeah.
I mean, it must have taken 2 hours to set the thing up, just the bar part, not the food part.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, I did take some food.
No, you had to. Yeah.
Guys, I mean, it's people back home have gotten mad at me, but Southerners can't drink with Northerners. Southerners win in football. They have way better football.
I don't know. I mean,
Northerners are better drinkers.
If I brought someone from the north a real bottle of moonshine, I mean, I feel like that might level the playing field a little bit. So, I mean,
there you go.
I mean,
yeah,
I can bring in some stuff they could run their car on and see how they can
South,
handle it.
we drink to have fun in the South. They drink just so they're not cold.
Yeah, I mean, I guess survival.
Yeah. So like, it's like there's coffee drinkers who enjoy the coffee. I'm going to sip my coffee. Then there's coffee drinkers who's like, I need my caffeine and get the hell out of my way until I have it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right. Oli, fantastic stuff. We certainly appreciate your time, and have a great weekend. Watch those conference championship games.
Yeah.
Enjoy, and then we'll talk to you in about a week. It was good seeing you the other day.
Sounds good. We'll see you.
I appreciate it. Oli Lane, nice enough to join us. His appearance brought to you in part by Dynasty Pools and Spas.
Dave Hooker here for Dynasty Pools and Spas, your home for the best spas and everything you need to jump right in. Relaxing, therapeutic, absolutely. But what sets Dynasty Pools and Spas apart from others is that you get everything with any spa purchase. You get the cover lift, the steps, delivery, and chemicals. When Dynasty Pools and Spas delivers your spa from their Athens location within 125 miles, you'll get your own personal hydrotherapy spa. Mention me, Dave Hooker, or Off the Hook Sports, and get $500 off your top quality new spa. Dynasty Pools and Spas, just off the Athens exit. Drop in and receive a free gift from Off the Hook Sports, Dynasty Pools and Spas. Mention Off the Hook Sports for a drop-in prize and that $500 discount. Dynasty Pools and Spas. To check out some of the Dynasty Spa models and to buy spa chemicals, go to dynastypoolsandspas.com. Dynasty Pools and Spas.
Tennessee receiver Caleb Webb has announced he will enter the transfer portal. Is this a loss for Tennessee? How significant of a loss is this for Tennessee? There are always going to be guys that are shown the door. I'll share with you the inside information that I have, but Caleb, what are your thoughts?
I think Tennessee, I don't think Caleb Webb's a big loss. I was surprised he didn't transfer out after the 2023 season when Chaz Nimrod started playing more than him. And I missed the boat on this. I thought Caleb Webb was going to be a receiver they built around when he committed back in 2022 for the future. I misevaluated completely. And by the way, guys, just so y'all know of me saying that, see, I even volunteer when I'm wrong when you didn't even know I was wrong. None of you guys knew that I thought Caleb Webb was going to be good, but I acknowledged that I thought he was going to be good. And I was dead wrong.
I can tell you what I was told midseason, that he was really coming along and that they liked his progress. So I'm going to say this one's a loss. And I'm not going to be the guy that's going to come on here and tell you that, oh, you don't need him and all this stuff. But I do think this one's a loss. I think this is one that kind of gets lost in the churn of college football. It used to be the norm, especially like at places like Alabama, that you wouldn't play for the first 2 years and then you'd have 2 big years. And I thought Caleb Webb was kind of on that trajectory. Maybe not big years, but definitely contributing years. And I think this is one of the more unfortunate losses, because I think he would have gotten on the field. I think he would have played. I think he got frustrated when he saw Mike Matthews playing quite a bit and Chaz Nimrod playing quite a bit. But at some point, tough times make for tough men. I hate that he's given in on this. Now, the other two, Khalifa Keith, I get it. There's not a place for him here at Tennessee. And Bison Lang, I don't think could play at this level. So both of those, I think, made the right move. I'll be honest with you. I don't think Caleb Webb made the right move. I think he should have stuck it out, and I believe he would have played. Now, I'm not suggesting that he would have been one of Tennessee's top 3 receivers. And if that's what he wants to do, that's fine. But I don't believe this is a guy that was shown the door, whereas that could have been the case with Bison Lang. I don't think Khalifa Keith was shown the door either, but I think Khalifa Keith saw the handwriting on the wall. Bison Lang definitely saw the handwriting on the wall, but I think Caleb Webb would have played. I think it's unfortunate.
Yeah, but how much? And here's what I think we have to take into account, Dave. The allure of playing receiver in Heupel's offense right now is not what it was when just at the beginning of this season, quite honestly. I think at the beginning of the season, the allure was with the right offense and the right quarterback, 3 of us could all go over 600 yards receiving at minimum, maybe even 800. Now, with the 3-3-5 and the way teams have played Tennessee and the way they've just sold out to take away the deep ball, I think you got to see a lot more crisp route running. You got to be willing to work the field a little more. It's really hard to get one 1,000-yard receiver now. And
yeah, but see, here's the chicken or the egg. I think that what you're going to see, you got a lot of these teams dropping back now. As Nico gets better early next year in September, I think you're going to see a lot of passes thrown underneath until they break defenses and they have to walk up. And I think Tennessee's going to continue to run the football. I think they're going to have a punishing tailback in Peyton Lewis, who I believe is going to be a borderline superstar in college. And you're going to see the receiver position be coveted once again by prospects who want to play that position. I think this is just a minor bump in the road. Like you'd have with most any young quarterback.
Yeah, but it takes usually a year to adjust. So how long does Caleb Webb have to wait? He's already been in the program for 2 years. And Dave, let's be honest. Whatever you think about how much you would have played, I think you and I both know Mike Matthews is 1,000 times better than Caleb Webb is. Mike Matthews is one of the most talented players that wide receiver Tennessee's ever had.
I'm not suggesting that he's higher on the pecking order than Mike Matthews, nor will he ever be. I'm definitely not. But he, if I told you right now that he could catch 18 balls next year and you're his parent, would you tell him to stay? And let's say, I'm sorry to interrupt. Let's say he could go to Vanderbilt and catch 45 balls.
Go to Vanderbilt.
No, see, I would rather my kid stick it out and be at Tennessee and be able to benefit from everything that is at Tennessee. One of the things that gets lost a little bit in this whole NIL discussion is if you stick it out and keep your nose clean, and sometimes in cases guys haven't kept their nose clean, but if you stick it out, I mean, you're going to have incredible opportunities.
But
coming out because of the alumni base.
But Dave, see, that's where I'm kind of breaking with you, because you also get those opportunities if you have a degree from Vanderbilt. So, I mean, like,
I picked a bad school. Okay, let's say he transfers to MTSU.
Yeah, stay at Tennessee. But if you're talking like a lesser SEC program, like you might have a debate maybe with Mississippi State, because a degree from Mississippi State, I don't know what that gets you.
Okay, but forget. Forget about the degree part. It's connections, and yes, you have that degree. Okay, let me ask you this: in terms of just a program, don't you think that Arkansas and Kentucky are a step down from Tennessee, because that's where they lost two prospects from last year? I'm sorry, 2 players from last year.
Yes, but in terms of what if your goal is going to the NFL? Okay, you're going to be on the same number of national TV games at Arkansas as you are Tennessee, because you're both in the SEC now. You're locked into the ESPN ABC thing, which carries the NFL draft, which is partners with the NFL, all of that. First Take, all the weekday shows, all they talk about is SEC games now, because that's all that's carried on ESPN. So it doesn't matter what team you play for in the SEC if you're in the SEC. And you just choose between 18 catches or 45 catches, what increases your chances of going to the NFL draft?
I don't think that matters, because I think they judge it off what you do at Pro Day. They judge it off what the coaches say. They judge it off a lot of different things. I think they find an elite prospect or even a good prospect, and if he's just caught 18, Alvin Kamara is a great example. That guy, I mean, he should have had a Dylan Sampson-like season. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. They found him.
But Dave, you're making my point with Alvin Kamara. That's actually a great one, the one you brought up, Alvin Kamara. Because of his production and the misuse of him, and that he didn't touch the ball enough in college, he fell to the 3rd round when, by all accounts, he should have been a 1st-round draft pick. And then, on the other hand, we just heard Will West talking about him, Jalen Hyatt, because he won the Biletnikoff, not because he was good, but because he played in the right system, he moved up to a 3rd-round pick when by all accounts, he shouldn't have even been drafted. He's not a good receiver. Dude can't play. And so he is, you compared him to Alvin Harper. I mean, Alvin Harper had to seem like he could run some routes. I mean, Jalen Hyatt, like, we're going, someone just brought him up earlier. Well, I'll just say it. We're going Leonard Scott level with route running ability at this point.
Well, that's pretty bad. I mean,
like, we're going just a track star with hands. That's all he is. Well, I mean, we're going basically what Willie Gault kind of was accused of being, was a track star with hands when he played at Tennessee. But I think we found out in the NFL he was more than that. He actually was a good route runner playing for the Bears.
Well, yeah, Leonard Scott was a track star without hands.
He was a track star without hands. Jalen Hyatt's a track star with hands. That's all he is.
Yep. Don't forget to use the promo code HOOKED and you get 10% off whatever they have at TriStarHatsCo.com. TriStarHatsCo.com. You're not going to believe the coach that North Carolina is about to hire, and it very well could have a massive effect on Tennessee's football recruiting in that state. Also, odds to win a national championship. I'll give you a little bit of insight. Stay tuned. 60 seconds from TriStarHatsCo.com.
Have you seen the latest TriStar Hats Co. product?
TriStar Hats Co.? What's that?
You know, those really cool hats, shirts, tumblers, and even license plates with 3 stars like the official Tennessee flag and stripes like the American flag. Pretty patriotic if you ask me.
Ah, gotcha. Seen those. Those are cool. Where can I get them?
Simple. TriStarHatsCo.com. And if you order now, there's 10% on any order $50 or more. Plus, use the promo code HOOKED.
With the promo code HOOKED, you get 10% off. That's hooked.
And don't forget free shipping with any order over $50. Stock up at TriStarHatsCo.com. That's TriStarHatsCo.com. There are plenty of wannabes out there, so make sure you go to TriStarHatsCo.com for the best quality and customer service.
Will do, and I'll be sure to use the promo code HOOKED. That's hooked when I do, to save an additional 10% off. TriStarHatsCo.com.
TriStar Hats Co. is a trademark of TriStar Hats Co. LLC. Any use without...
All right, Caleb, coming up on the program, we're going to get to that coach that I think Tennessee fans should be very afraid of. If he takes the North Carolina job, and I'm going to tell you why. And I've covered recruiting for a lot of years. So go ahead, and if you haven't to this point, please hit that thumbs up button, like the program. We certainly appreciate our regular listeners, but by doing that, we bring more and more in. And if you want to super chat it, you can. It goes to Quincy Calhoun's College Fund. The show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com.
Now in its 45th year, the second and third generations continue Joe Neubert's commitment.
His vision of what this business needed to be, we still try to live up to that.
Joe Neubert Collision Center.
24 F-150 4x4 Super Crew, $46,997. 24 Ford Transit 250 cargo van, $50,950. 24 Ford Maverick XLT Hybrid, $28,929. Local you trust, power you can afford.
Having been in the jewelry industry for a long time in the Knoxville community, I saw a need for a jeweler, a real jeweler.
Our ability to do these designs has really been based on the customers bringing new things in and challenging us as a store. Our goal is not to tell anybody what they want. Our goal is to listen to what they want and then help them get there.
Schedule your consultation today to get your special someone the perfect custom gift just in time for the holidays.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
Dare to compare.
With our brand new location on Emory Road, Eye Care Optical is bringing East Tennessee's best eye care to your neighborhood. Doctors Johnston and Combs offer unmatched expertise and care without a trip to Knoxville. Eye Care Optical, now in Powell.
Double D Piping provides full-service fire protection on any scale. From residential homes to government facilities, we can assist any customer through design, fabrication, installation, inspection, and demonstration of fire suppression systems. With 30 years of service across 5 states and a full staff with over 40 years experience, our quality can't be beat. Don't get caught watching what you could have prevented. Call Double D Piping, the absolute best in fire prevention.
The Dave Hooker Show, represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorneys. Play to win, banksjones.com.
He tries very hard. The Dave Hooker Show.
All I know is when we win a game, it's a team win. When we lose a game, it's a team loss.
A presentation of Off the Hook Sports.
Sideline! Touchdown! Unbelievable!
YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the free Off the Hook Sports app. Back to Dave Hooker.
Bonus coverage. We got to get to this. And yeah, we're running a little bit over. So if you're just tuning in, we're usually 10 a.m. to noon, but we're not afraid to do a little overtime. No problem here whatsoever. Last Look brought to you by Doctors Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn.
Before jumping in,
Yes.
can I give you a quick Jalen Hyatt comparison and see if you agree with me on this?
Lay it on me, brother.
He's a shorter version. He's just a shorter Mike Williams, the old USC receiver who tried to go to the draft early, but then couldn't, and then ended up in the draft anyway. Mike Williams was nothing but a track star. Got to the NFL, realized that defensive backs were fast enough to hang with him, and he was useless at that point.
I don't know. I thought Caleb Webb kind of had better hips than most than just a track star. I think we
You mean Jalen Hyatt?
Or, I'm sorry, Jalen Hyatt. No, I think he was way better than Mike Williams as a prospect, strictly just coming out of college.
I think we all misjudged. I think we were right to say Cedric Tillman was the better prospect. He's proven that.
All right, here we go. There's a coach that could come in to the North Carolina area that I think Tennessee fans should be very worried about. And tell me about it. The Tar Heels might hire whom?
The Tar Heels might hire Bill Belichick. That's right, guys. They are in talks with each other right now. So,
okay. So level of concern if you're Tennessee, who needs the Carolinas to work for them in recruiting. Scale of 1 to 10, Caleb.
I know you're going to go totally opposite with me. And I want to say up front before I say what I'm about to say, I think Bill Belichick is the greatest coach in NFL history. I think that the success in New England, I don't care what happened in Tampa, was much more about Bill Belichick's defense than it was Tom Brady. Tom Brady turned into a great player, but Bill Belichick was the start of that. My worry, if I'm a Tennessee fan, is a 1. This won't work. And do you want to tell me why you think it will, or do you want me to tell you why I am sure that it won't?
Yeah, I think it hurts Tennessee because he will walk in, especially if it's somebody that's a North Carolina fan, if it's a family that's a North Carolina fan, I think you get them immediately. Like, let's say I'm just picking randomly. Let's say it's James Pierce, David Sanders. I don't know if they grew up North Carolina fans or not, but let's say they did. And there's absolutely no reason to go to North Carolina with Mac Brown there, right? I mean, there's really no future in that. I question the development, that sort of thing. But I think Bill Belichick would have the panache like Nick Saban had of, I'm going to develop you and get you ready for the NFL. That would be his sales pitch. So as opposed to Tennessee perhaps ruling North Carolina, if they were to go hire some goofball, and I'm going to get to that, Steve, why would Bill want to coach at North Carolina? But I believe that you would have a lot of kids that grew up North Carolina fans, maybe just via basketball, that would say, yep, I'm going to give him a shot. I can always transfer portal out if I need to, but I'm going to give him a shot and see what you can build. Now, I covered North Carolina in recruiting. There is a big sense of pride there. there are a lot of prospects you talk to that have to make business decisions against their heart, Caleb. I mean, that's it. I can't tell you how many I talked to over the years. Todd Gurley would be one that deep down he wanted North Carolina to be great, but that was never really even an option. And I could list more, but if they believe if there's an influx of NIL and Bill Belichick, and they believe that you could rise North Carolina up, Tennessee would lose 2 or 3 prospects that they're in on. I'm not talking about losing a dozen. You know that, right?
Yeah, you're talking 2 or 3.
About losing one David Sanders or one James Pierce. That would absolutely be horrible. Now, Steve says, why would Bill Belichick want to coach at North Carolina? Well, to be honest with you, the same reason Jerry Green wanted to coach at Tennessee, because it's a golden parachute, gives him something to do. He's a workaholic.
Jerry Green wasn't a workaholic.
Well, he was a somethingaholic. And you couldn't even get he couldn't get a sniff for an NFL job because he wants total control. Well, if I'm North Carolina, and I know you want to argue, I wouldn't think you'd argue with this, but if there's anybody I'm turning over complete control to, it's going to be Bill Belichick, right?
Yes. Now my turn.
Okay, go.
Bill Belichick won't be able to recruit. Let me just put that out there. Bill Belichick can't recruit. You guys are thinking that he's like, because he's such a just insufferable human being, that Nick Saban, that you see Nick Saban in him, and Nick Saban was able to recruit. But Dave, you're forgetting one big thing about Nick Saban. When Nick Saban first took the LSU job, he was not as insufferable of a human being as he became. He was actually a really nice guy back then. And then he won and he became insufferable. Okay. Also, he was at LSU. Bill Belichick has no credibility right now as a college coach to be able to recruit. Also, he's a defensive coach, not an offensive coach. And what have I always said to you guys? And I've said this to you, Dave, and I think you agree with me. Offense, you win with X's and O's. Defense, you win with Jimmys and Joes. Fair?
Well, but okay, we're talking about a whole different world with Belichick. Nobody's going to be out of position. Everybody's going to be fundamentally sound. I mean, that's just, I mean,
he has no cutting edge offensive game plan though to get North Carolina ahead. That's my point.
There's something to be said for solid fundamentals winning football games.
Not when you don't have the Jimmys and Joes. The solid fundamentals is important when you have the Jimmys and Joes because you just need to make sure they don't make mistakes. But when you are coaching an undermanned team, you need to be ahead of the curve on X's and O's with a cutting-edge creative offense. Name the last defensive coordinator, Dave. The last defensive coordinator that became a head coach that did like what Josh Heupel did at Tennessee, did that at a school that was down in the dumps as a defensive coach.
Well, I mean, you have to give me Kirby Smart and Nick Saban.
No, Kirby Smart and Nick Saban took over elite programs already.
Alabama wasn't elite at the time. Georgia was at a 10-win per season.
Put it this way: that had a bunch of talent they didn't take over what Josh Heupel took over at Tennessee. Can we say that they didn't take over the dump that Josh Heupel took over at Tennessee?
No, but very few did. I mean, at a top 25 program, I mean, that's as dumpy as it can get.
Yeah, and only an offensive coach with a creative mind could turn that around. What I'm trying to say is this. How about this? Name a defensive coach that took over a school that couldn't recruit top 10 level and was able to win top 10 talent, and was able to win like a top 10 team. It's all offensive coaches that do that. You give me Kirby Smart and Nick Saban, I'm giving you number 1 recruiting classes. And I'm telling you, Bill Belichick won't be bringing in number 1 recruiting classes. That's not going to be happening.
Okay.
And also,
but Christine says Patriots had trillions of dollars, Dave. Carolina don't. Huge difference. But listen, Christine, here's what you're missing. I'm talking about I'm talking about if they go all in. I'm not talking about if they hire Bill Belichick and say, we're not spending the darn NIL dollar. If they go all in, I mean, they have the money. I mean, that's
Michael Jordan could just give them the money.
Yeah. I mean, they could get behind this thing. I mean, guys, if Deion Sanders can turn around Colorado, then Bill Belichick could turn around the University of North Carolina.
do you think Bill Belichick could recruit the way Deion Sanders does?
I think he would hire the right people and surround himself with the right people that could.
That's for X's and O's, but the head coaches, Dave, you covered recruiting. Players commit to the head coach. Like rule number one, most of the time, they commit to the head coach, not to the assistants, right?
Most of the time, yes. But you can also be a closer and just show up. Steve Spurrier was that.
Yeah, but Steve Spurrier, players committed to Steve Spurrier because they wanted to play in that offense. And also he was at Florida and winning a lot of games. And so I don't think Bill Belichick would have the cachet that Deion would. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Bill Belichick's name will help him recruit. But, I mean, the guy hasn't been successful coaching, and, like, his last Super Bowl was 6 years ago. So these kids that would be coming out would be 12 or 13, would have been 12 or 13 when he was last successful. So I'm not really seeing this. And I get what you know North Carolina better than I do. You know what I see as North Carolina? And I'll tell you this way. I'll do the reverse. I've told you guys I grew up in Memphis. I knew a lot of Tennessee football fans in Memphis. A lot of them lived there that were like, I grew up watching them. I've always loved them. You know what I never heard? I grew up watching Tennessee basketball. Never heard one person say that in Memphis. I feel like the whole state of North Carolina, they may tell you, I grew up watching North Carolina basketball. Love them. I doubt one player has ever said, I grew up watching North Carolina football in history.
Okay,
I doubt one person.
Make it our poll question. I'm going to share some numbers with you here in a second because I think you undervalue the amount of money that North Carolina has. So that's brought to you.
Also, if Michael Jordan is throwing the money at the players, he misevaluates everybody anyway.
Probably true. All right. So set up a poll question now. Would Bill Belichick have success in college? And it's brought to you by Medicare Misty.
I've been in business actually 19 years this year. I've been in the community since 1993. You're getting a lot of information. Unlike when you were working, they made the choice for you. Now you have to make the choice. Come to us and let us help you make it easy. Call Medicare Misty, MedicareMisty.com or 423-777-5577. Let us help them sleep at night.
And we call her Medicare Misty.
Okay, Tennessee's athletic budget is right at $200 million. So let me give you, and this is not where the NIL money comes from necessarily, but it gives you an idea of the facilities and the sorts of things that they have there. The North Carolina operating athletic budget is $140 million. So there's reason enough for me to think that this could be scary. And again, I'm not talking about they're going to just control the state and shut down the borders. But what if they get a Heath Schuler? I mean, that to me, one player can make a monstrous difference. You talked about how important Nico was. What if they target that one guy?
Not gonna happen. And I'll tell you why it's not going to happen. Why do you think Tennessee's reestablished a pipeline into North Carolina, Dave? You want to know the real reason? And that Mac Brown was forced out?
Because a lot of those schools are terrible.
But Tennessee in the 90s had one, and in the 2020s have one. Why didn't they have one in the 2010s and 2000s? Why? Why do they have one now? Why did they reestablish it? Do you know why?
Because Tennessee was off. I mean, Tennessee's good now.
That's not why. What happened was the ACC has effectively been relegated to a second-tier conference. So there was, back in the 90s, okay, so put it this way. In the 90s and the 2000s, we always said the SEC was the best conference, but we said, okay, but they're 5 power conferences and they're all in the same tier. That's what we said, right? The SEC is just the best of that tier. Now it's no. The SEC and the Big Ten are a tier above, and then the ACC and the Big 12 are a tier below. You get less exposure. You get less marquee games. So because of that, nobody wants to play in the ACC that's an elite player wherever they are. And it's only going to get worse, by the way, because of that horrible ACC deal, which, again, people keep trying to say that deal's not ironclad. We have T. Scott Jones talk to us on our show. That deal's ironclad. People don't want it to be ironclad because they think it's better for college football if Clemson and Florida State can get out and get in the SEC. That people who say that would like to see the SEC add those teams. They're not going to, and they're not going to be able to because that ACC deal is ironclad. They are stuck in that league until 2036.
Okay.
And so Bill Belichick will not have success.
Give us an update on our poll question. What do you got there, Caleb?
Will Bill Belichick have success in college? No, he can't recruit 75%. Yes, he's an amazing coach, 25%. People are on my side. By the way, there's one caveat to this. Bill Belichick would definitely be the one to hire Connor Stallions.
Yeah, that's probably true. The show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney. Banks & Jones never deflated, as we join you each and every weekday at 10 a.m. on YouTube. Please hit that like and subscribe button. The show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, Banks & Jones.